Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei was son of Yōkai and Asgardian and became Teen Wolf Warrior Part 2. Before we start, please go support CarlosManuelMamaniQu for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Issei is a male. Season 2 Episode 1 Christmas. It was night. In the forest everything was dark, no one could see anything there, no one except Scott. Scott was running through the night. It had been 2 days since Peter was killed by Derek. Now Scott was heading to Jackson's house since today was a full moon and Scott found out that Derek turned Jackson. Scott ran until he reached Jackson's house, and when he entered he saw that he was sleeping peacefully. Scott, apparently it didn't affect him. Scott left Jackson's house and returned to his own where he met up with his mother. Scott, Mom. Melissa, you're still awake. Scott, yes, it happened, Mom. Melissa, your dad called me 3 days ago and told me he could come for the holidays. Scott, seriously, that's good news, Mom. Scott hugs his mother. Scott, good thing we'll finally see him after 1 year. Melissa, yes, tomorrow we will go to the mall to buy everything to decorate the house. Scott, it's okay, Mom. Scott, I'm going to rest in my room. Melissa, see you tomorrow, son. Scott walks into his room thinking about that, and appears in the black void again. Scott, it's about time. Goku, you're finally alone after 2 days. Scott, yes, I had to take care of Lydia and Jackson. Goku, well, back to what we came for. Scott, yes. Goku, my name is Son Goku, and I chose you to inherit my power. Scott, me because I. Goku, because I see in you courage, strength, and a true leader, which I couldn't be in the past. Scott, what's your story? Goku, I was born on another planet called Planet Vegeta. My parents decided to send me away from the planet because an evil villain named Frieza was going to destroy it for fear that the legendary Super Saiyan would emerge. Scott, Super Saiyan? Goku, that's right, the Super Saiyan is the transformation that the Saiyans undergo when suffering a trauma, anger or stress that unleashes their power stored within them. When Frieza destroyed the planet, he killed my parents, but they had already sent me to Earth where I crashed on Mount Pozu in China where my grandfather Gohan found me. He raised me until I killed him by turning into a giant ape. After that I met my friends, got married, and had children, but that was 150 years ago, and now I don't. Vegeta, my best friend, and I decided to grow old with our wives. Our children decided the same. The Saiyan lineage died with us. Scott, wow, it's an incredible story, and what do I have to do with all this? Goku, I want to give you my blood so you can be the last Saiyan in the universe. Scott, why do I say I'm not worthy? Goku, I have seen your life since you were a child, the rejection of your parents, Emily's infidelity, and the happiness you have now with Melissa, Raphael Styles, and Allison and the others. I never at any time noticed hatred or resentment towards your parents or anyone. Scott was with his head down. Goku, I will give you my blood will fuse with yours, and thus you will have Saiyan cells to become. Scott, that's it. Goku, that's right, this is a Super Saiyan, this is just part of my power. There are transformations that you will get later that will make you stronger. Scott, how should I train? Goku, it's a common training, but every day try to increase your exercises more and reach your limit. When you do it, you can surpass them even more. Scott, I understand. Goku, good, now you will have to bite me on the neck so you will take my blood and it will join with you. Another thing, I don't want you to tell anyone about your powers. Tell anyone that you are a werewolf, but not about these powers that I gave you. I know it sounds selfish, but it will be for your own good. Scott, I understand something else. Goku, protect this planet. Scott, protect this planet that gave me everything I have and made me everything I am. Protect it. Scott agreed. Then Scott bit Goku on the neck and his blood began to enter his cells, mixing with his DNA. Scott outside in his room felt his body burning at more than 45 degrees. Scott, AAA. Scott was holding on to the DNA change while outside the clouds had gathered and lightning began to fall. Scott, AAA. Scott felt pain for 5 minutes until he calmed down. Scott, That hurts now. I have scion blood. I will train as soon as possible after Christmas. Now I am going to sleep. Tomorrow I have to go shopping. Scott falls asleep. The next day. Scott was getting up, then Melissa enters. Melissa, Scott, get up now. We have to go to the mall, cut the tree, and prepare everything for the day after tomorrow. Scott, okay. Melissa, hurry up. We have to go to the mechanic before going to the mall. Scott, what happened to it? Melissa, the carburetor is failing again. Scott, Mom, my uncle sent you something. Scott takes a folder out of his nightstand and gives it to his mom. Melissa looks at the folder. Melissa, this is what I think it is. Scott, these are the car's ownership documents. Melissa, them. Scott, they said it was a gift for not being able to come to your birthday, so they decided to give you that. Melissa, yeah, no more mechanic, yeah. Scott, ha ha ha, congratulations, Mom. Well, I'm going to take a shower and change. Scott went into his shower, took a shower, and came out to change. Scott, Mom, I'm here. Scott goes downstairs and sees his mom. Scott, wow, Mom, what? Melissa, there's a new car. I won't go in my pajamas. Scott, good point. Melissa, lose. Scott and Melissa get in their car. Scott drives. Until we reach the shopping center. Melissa, okay, Scott, first things first, decorations. We can start at those stores over there. Melissa, I like those napkins for the table. Scott, they're beautiful. Just then, Allison walks into the store with her parents. Scott, Allison. Allison, Scott. Allison and Scott hugged and kissed. Scott, Mrs. Argent, Mr. Argent, nice to see you. Chris, Scott, Mrs. McCall, nice to see you. Victoria, hi Melissa, nice to see you as well, Scott. Allison, Mrs. McCall, you look beautiful. Melissa, thanks, Allison, nice to see you too. Chris and Victoria. What are you doing here? Chris, shopping for Christmas items. Melissa, Raphael is coming this year, so we want to surprise him. Allison, Dad, Mom, can I go for a walk with Scott? Chris, sure, honey, come on. Scott, Mom. Melissa, if you're okay, son, we'll see you in 3 hours. Victoria, we could go shopping with you too. Melissa, that would be perfect. Scott and Allison left and headed to the ice rink. Allison, Scott, I've never skated before. Scott, well, this will be your first time. Scott and Allison put on their ice skates and started skating around the rink. Scott, wow, that was fun. Allison, yeah, lol, but you almost fell. Scott, for your first time skating, you did pretty good. Allison, what can I say, natural talent. Scott skated with Allison for another 1 hour until they left the rink and went into the woods. Allison, the forest looks more beautiful when there is snow. Scott, come on, get on. Scott bent down so Allison could climb on his back. When Allison climbed on his back, Scott started to run quickly. Allison watched as the snow slowly fell. Allison, you look beautiful. Scott, true, if we go back to the mall it's already 2 in the afternoon, we're going to have lunch. Scott and Allison arrived at the mall where their parents were. When they entered they saw that their parents had several bags and they helped them. Victoria, how did you have fun? Allison, yes. Melissa, it's late, let's go to lunch. Chris, could we accompany you? Melissa, yes, of course, no problem. They walked to the restaurant where upon entering they saw everything was beautiful. Chris, Mrs. McCall, how did you get a reservation at this restaurant? Melissa, I know the owner of the restaurant. Owner, hi Melissa, how are you dear, come in. Melissa, hi and sorry but we need a bigger table, there are 7 of us. Chris, I think Melissa is the only one there. But then Styles and his dad enter. Chris, Sheriff Stilinski. Styles. Sheriff, Mr. Argent, Mrs. Argent, Allison. They all welcomed each other. Styles pulled Scott aside. Styles, what are they doing here? Scott, Mom invited them. Styles, she invited them, ignoring the fact that her dad is going to hunt you. Scott, No, in fact, I talked to Mr. Argent. He told me that they will not hunt me anymore. Styles, that's good, isn't it? Scott, of course it is. Finally, I'm not running away anymore. Styles, your uncles are coming in 2 days, right? Scott, if they haven't had time to eat because of work like my dad this year, everyone will eat. Styles, you guys sure make your Christmases big. Scott, Mom has something planned. Styles, what a thing to invite everyone, Jackson and his family, Lydia and her family, Allison and her family, and you and your dad. Styles, that's amazing. Scott, true, today she will tell Allison's family and her pawa, and tomorrow I will tell Jackson and Lydia. Styles, there's going to be a party this year. Scott, Styles, there's something I want to talk to you about. Styles, what's up? Allison, calm down, they're like this because of how they found you last night. On the lacrosse field, Scott and Styles were practicing until they saw Styles' dad talking to Isaac, telling him that his dad had died, but he didn't even flinch and continued with the training. Styles, you heard about his father's death. Scott, I found out something. Styles, what are you going to do? Scott, see if it's a werewolf. Scott put himself as a defender and began to tackle everyone until he saw it was Isaac's turn. He tried to tackle him, but Isaac put more force, and when they fell, they were in the same position. At that, Scott noticed that Isaac was changing his eyes. Scott, hey, calm down. You can't change here. Calm down, mate. Isaac slowly calmed down and went to the locker room. Styles, what happened if it was him? Scott, it's a werewolf. I think it was him. Styles, we should tell him. Scott, not yet, not worse today, that's a full moon. Scott looked for Isaac, but when he left, he saw him being taken away in a police car. That's when Derek arrives. Derek, get in. Scott, seriously, that's your fault. Derek, I lose now, get in the car and help me. Scott, no, I have no better idea. I'll call a lawyer. A lawyer has a better chance of getting him out before the full moon comes up. Derek, not if they search his house properly. Scott, what are you talking about? Derek, I don't know what Jackson said to the police, but it's worse at his house. Much worse. Scott gets into Derek's car and they drive away. Into the night. At Jackson's house. Math, I don't know about you, but I feel uneasy. Jackson, don't feel $100 richer now, take it and go buy yourself a lens or a light reflector, whatever it is that nerdy photographers use. Math, this has nothing to do with Allison, right? I saw them at the winter formal, and I thought they were dating. Jackson, or so you like Allison, you like her, you think I would waste my time making a hex tape. Math, so. Jackson, I'm going to record the story. Jackson walks in and Math leaves. Jackson goes up to his room, turns on the camera, and falls asleep. With Scott. Scott, are you sure we'll find something here? Derek, don't lose it. Scott, did you see what happened at training? Derek, yes, I did. Scott, it looks so bad. Derek, yeah, really bad. Scott and Derek walk into the room and see nothing wrong. Scott, there's nothing, he didn't die here. Derek, you're right, that means Isaac is innocent. Scott, we have to help him. Derek, because you. Scott, because he's my responsibility too. Derek, because he's one of us. Scott, because he's innocent. Derek, fine, I'll go with Styles to the police station. Scott, the hunters no longer have a code, be careful. Derek leaves and Scott stays looking for more evidence of his innocence. With Styles. Styles, fine, how will you get it out according to you? Derek, entering quietly, you stay here. Styles, quietly, fine. Derek enters and Styles gets a call. Allison, Styles, where is Scott? Styles, at Isaac's house. Allison, I'm going with him. Allison arrived at Isaac's house. Allison, Scott? Scott, up here. Allison, the full moon, you. Scott, calm down, I can control myself, help me look for clues to Isaac's innocence. Allison, are you sure? Scott, 100%. Allison, You already entered the basement. Scott, that's what I was getting at. Allison and Scott went down and saw the basement where there was a refrigerator with a padlock. When they opened it, they saw that inside there were bottles of water and food. Allison, this is it. Scott, Isaac's bastard father locked him in here. We can use this to prove that Isaac wasn't. Let's say he was locked in. Then a knock is heard on the ceiling. Scott goes up to the roof while Allison was lurking around the kitchen. Then above Allison on the roof appears. It was dark so no one could see anything, and Allison screams. Scott, Allison. Scott quickly goes down and sees the eyes of the creature, so he fights with it, pushes and kicks it. The creature just ran out of there. Scott, you're okay. Allison, yes, it was that thing. Scott, I don't know. At the police station, an officer was with a syringe about to inject Isaac, but Styles appears and kicks him. The officer was stronger, so he grabbed Styles and threw him against a cell, but Derek arrives, who quickly knocks him out. But the moon was already there, and Isaac had transformed into a werewolf and tried to bite Styles, but Derek turns into a werewolf and yells at him, uncovering Isaac. Derek. You're okay? Styles, yes. Derek, I'll take him. Derek took Isaac out and took him away. After 10 minutes the sheriff arrived. Styles, I tried to free him. Sheriff, yeah? The next day it was dawning and Jackson got up and checked the camera, where he saw that he slept all night. Season 2 Episode 5 Ice Pick. It was a new day at school. At the gym all the students and the coach were there climbing the wall. Scott, he had a tail. Allison, really? Scott, if I don't have a tail? Allison, or maybe it won't grow. Scott, I won't grow a tail, I hope. Allison, why are you going up so slow? Scott, because I'm admiring the view. Scott was looking at Allison's ass. Allison, maybe you should admire her from higher up. Allison started to quickly climb the wall. When she stopped, she saw that Scott was still watching her from the side. Scott, I'll wait for you. Allison kicked a block that was holding Scott, making him fall. Scott, wow. Coach, ha ha ha. McCall, your pain makes me especially happy. The next ones were Stilinski and Erica. Styles and Erica began to climb. Styles did it fast and went down, but he saw how Erica was halfway, terrified. Styles, hey, are you okay? Just go up one by one. Erica, and yes. Erica went up 2 more and looked down, where she started to shake. By this time Styles had already gone down. Coach, hurry up Erica, we don't have all day. Student, no coach, she's paralyzed. Coach, Erica, you're okay, come down Erica. Lydia, she has epilepsy. Coach, why didn't anyone tell me about these things? Erica, just let go Erica. Erica was crying and scared. Scott quickly went up and grabbed her to get loose and go down with the harness. Scott, you're okay. Coach, well done McCall, extra point for your exam even if you don't need it. Scott, take her to the hospital. Coach, that's what I'll do. The coach took Erica. Allison, poor thing. Scott, if having epilepsy is something terrible. The ambulance left for the hospital without realizing that behind it was Derek following in his car. At the hospital. Derek, you're okay. Erica, yes, who are you? Derek, my name is Derek, do you want to leave this behind? Erica, leave that. Derek, this is epilepsy, it's all about making you a better person. Erica, yes please. Derek, perfect. With Jackson, he had approached Lydia to complain that he didn't get what he wanted because of her. Lydia, crying, enters the bathroom, where she begins to have nightmares while awake, with Peter all burned. With Styles. Styles, Boyd, you have the keys. Boyd, this is not a favor, it's a transaction. Styles, yes, how can I forget it? Styles gave him $50. Styles, fine, thank you. Styles goes to Scott. Scott, I got them. I'll pick you up after work and we'll head to the track. Erica walks through the door. Lydia, what's going on? Scott and Styles followed Erica out of school, where they watched as he left with Derek in his car. Scott left for work in thought. While working, he dropped a bottle. Scott, everything got out of my control, everything got out of control. Deaton, that sounds really overwhelming for a kid your age to say. Scott, it's like a poison that doesn't run now. Deaton, look at it this way, it's the natural law of the universe, but there's always a shapeshifter that changes all this. Scott, hey Doc, we never talked about this. Deaton, you're right, now is a good time to talk about this, the more $200 or $250 an hour. Scott, what? Deaton, $250 an hour. Scott, $250. Deaton, good to clean the cat cage. Scott. With Allison, she was at home doing her homework while Chris was talking to Gerard until he walks into Allison's room. Chris, what are you doing? Allison, homework. Chris, I need you to see your friend, what she does, where she goes. Allison, you want me to keep an eye on her? Chris, we don't want anything bad to happen to her. Time skip 3H. Allison was out with Scott, Styles, and Lydia. Scott, let's go in there. Scott and Allison entered a photo booth. Allison, we came out fine. Scott and Allison walked hand in hand while Styles and Lydia talked quietly. Styles, you've been having those nightmares again. Lydia, yes, sometimes they are at night when I sleep, but lately they've been awake. Styles, you've had flashbacks of that day. Lydia, they're still blurry. Styles, don't try too hard, little by little you'll remember. Lydia, yes. Allison, guys, let's go to the ice rink. They all went in and saw that it was empty. Allison and Scott put on their skates and entered the rink, but Lydia was sitting. Styles, you don't want to go in. Lydia, I'm cold. Styles took off his black jacket and gave it to Lydia. Styles, okay, now I guess you could come in. Lydia, come on. Lydia grabbed Styles by the hand and led him to the dance floor, making Styles blush. So they spent the day having fun. The next day was Saturday and Jackson had gone to Derek's house. Jackson, Derek, where is what you promised me? It's not working, I know you can hear me, you promised me. Just then the door opens and Jackson is pulled in. Chris, you better keep quiet. Jackson, what are you doing? Let me go. Chris, don't come back here, Jackson, and be thankful that the bite didn't work on you. I wouldn't have wanted to have to chase you. Jackson leaves. With Styles, he was leaving his house, but Erica appears. Styles, what are you doing here? Erica, making sure. Styles, that. Erica, that you don't interfere. Erica knocks out Styles and ties him up in her room. With Scott, he had received a text from Styles' cell phone telling him to go to the ice rink. It was already 7 at night, and Scott had arrived. Scott, Styles, where are you? What did you want? Derek, Styles won't make it, Scott. Scott, what are you doing here? Scott, don't you see what Derek wants? He's not a good person, he changed them and uses them as his faithful dogs. Derek, seriously, why don't we debate it? Tell me what your life has been like since I met you. Erica, in one word, transformative. Erica shows her fangs. Isaac, being a fugitive is a little annoying, but the rest is fine. Scott, wait for me, this isn't fair. Derek, if you want, you can go, Scott. Scott breaks the floor with his fist. Scott, I was saying it for you. Scott in his wolf forms faces Erica and Isaac. Erica was the first to hit Scott, but he kicks her and sends him against the side of the track. That's when Boyd enters. Boyd, Derek, I'm back. Scott, Boyd, what are you doing here? Boyd, I came for what I got. Scott, no, don't do it or try, Derek. Isaac, you shouldn't get distracted. Isaac tried to hit Scott, but Scott hit him in the face, knocking him out. Derek, fine, it's my turn. Derek hit Scott, sending him to the side of the track. Scott quickly got up and hit him, but Derek didn't move. Scott used a moment of light to mow down Derek and beat him until he sent him to Erica and Isaac. Scott had wounds that wouldn't heal. Scott, you forgot that I beat Peter. Boyd, you don't have to be like them. Boyd, you're right, I want to be like you. Scott saw that he had a bite on one side of his abdomen. Scott, you didn't make a good decision that you wanted. Boyd, I wanted to stop sitting alone. Scott, if friends were what you wanted, you could have gotten better ones. You made your decision. Scott left there and went to the vet. Scott, because it doesn't heal. Deaton, it's because it's from an alpha. Scott, what? Deaton, Scott, it's time for us to talk. Season 2, Episode 6, Abominable. It was night, and on the highway you could see several cars driving quickly. Deaton, they'll be back, so we don't have much time. Scott, what is that? Deaton, it's alcohol, so you don't get infected. You'll heal fine, but not so fast because it's Derek's. Scott, hey, how do you know about all this? In fact, how do you know what this is about? Destin healed Scott. Deaton, it's a long story. What I can tell you is that I know you're kind. I can help those like you, but this is different. He shows him a torn body with 3 scratches on each part of the body. Scott, do you know what did that? Destin, no, but the Argents do, and that's the crucial part. Will they have some record or book with all their descriptions, stories, and notes about everything they've discovered? Scott, especially what we're talking about so much. At that, door opens and Scott hides. Several hunters enter. Deaton, I think I have to buy a bigger closed sign. Gerard, hey Alan, it's been a long time. I thought you had retired. Deaton, and I thought you had a code of conduct. Chris, in case you missed it, the body is one of our own. Deaton, yeah, I also noticed there's gunpowder residue on his fingers. Don't think I'm going to be convinced of your philosophy just because I'm answering your questions. Chris, he was 24. Destin, killers come in all ages. Gerard, ages, sizes, shapes. That last bit is what concerns us. Chris, why don't you tell us what you discovered? Deaton, see, this cut is almost surgically precise, but this isn't the wound that killed him. It's more interesting what its purpose is. Gerard, related to the spine. Scott was listening to everything. Deaton, so whatever he did, this cut contained a paralyzing toxin strong enough to disable motor functions. These are the cause of death. Notice the patterns on each side. Chris, 5 for each finger. Gerard, each claw. Deaton, as you can see, it buried itself in them and ripped upwards, eviscerating the lungs and severing the rib cage bones. Chris, have you seen anything like this before? Deaton, no. Chris, do you have any idea what could have killed him? Deaton, no, but I do know that it's very fast, very strong, and has the ability to render its victims defenseless in seconds. Chris, if you're trying to tell us to be careful, we already know that. Deaton, I'm not telling you to be afraid, very afraid, because in the food chain the ones that paralyze hunt to eat, and this one wasn't eaten, so it hunts for sport. With Styles. Styles, hey, how are you? Mechanic, good, we're almost there. Styles, let me know. Styles went to the store where when he knocked on the door he saw that there was something slimy. Styles felt dizzy, but before falling he sent an SOS message to Scott. Mechanic, help me, please help me. Styles was crawling and saw how his Jeep was going to fall on top of the mechanic's, but he stopped. Scott, Styles, are you okay? Stylus. Creature, aha. Scott yells and kicks him while the creature leaves. Then the police arrived and took the mechanic away. Sheriff, Styles, are you okay? Styles. Styles, I'm okay, Dad. Sheriff, what were you doing here at this hour? Styles, I was just fixing the Jeep. If I can leave. Styles and the sheriff leave. The next day Scott was talking to Allison. Allison, it will be hard to find it. Scott, I lose, but I need you to do it. That thing almost killed Styles. We need to know what it is and how to stop it. Allison, Berard is the one who has the keys. Scott, there is a lacrosse game tonight. Invite your grandfather. I will tell Styles to help us. Allison, good. With Derek. Isaac was training Erica and Boyd. Derek, attack. Isaac and Erica coordinated to attack. Isaac is grabbed by Derek's neck and slammed to the ground. Erica, no way. Erica is grabbed by the ankle and thrown to crash next to Isaac. Isaac, what are you doing? Derek, she taught them to survive. It was already 6 in the afternoon when Stoles was arriving at the school parking lot. When he got out of his Jeep, he saw Lydia crying in her car. Styles, Lydia. Lydia, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be on the substitutes. Styles, I was going, but I saw you here, so what's going on? Lydia, I'm going crazy. Styles, give me 5 minutes and I'll come back so you can tell me. On the field. Coach, oh no, where is Stalinsky? Stalinsky the hell didn't come, there's no one else who wants to play. On the stands were Boyd and Erica. Boyd, me? Erica, wait, Derek's not going to like this. Boyd, Derek's not going to like this, but I am. Boyd takes off his coat. Coach, we have one player. Jackson, McCock, what the hell is wrong with you? It's the semifinals, beat that steroid machine. Scott, you said playing like this wasn't fair. Jackson, you think that freak of nature is fair to do something. Scott, I can't, not with Allison's grandpa here. Allison, it's cold. Gerard, take my coat. Gerard gave him his coat, and Allison took out Gerard's keys and Styles took them. On the field. Coach 2, player change. Jackson, another serious phenomenon. Coach change. Player, I can't feel my legs, I can't feel my legs. Coach, Boyd, wipe them out. Boyd entered and the game resumed. Boyd was facing the opposing player who had more muscle mass than the entire team. Boyd was one-on-one pushing against the opposing player. Boyd beat him and scored, tying the game, but when he took off his helmet while celebrating, Scott saw how his eyes had changed. As the game continued, Scott and Boyd ran. Scott, Boyd, calm down, you have to calm down, don't let anger get the better of you, use force in your favor. Boyd slowly calmed down and pushed the bull player, throwing the ball to the ground. Scott picked up the ball and scored, but the player had already charged him. Boyd tried to hit him, but they were separated. Everyone went to see Scott. Melissa, son, are you okay? Scott, yes, Mom, what happened? Coach, you scored. Scott, we are in the finals. Everyone was celebrating and Scott gets up. Allison, okay, Grandpa, we're leaving. Gerard, wait, first I have to ask Scott a question. With Styles, he had entered Gerard's office at the school address. When he entered, he looked everywhere until he saw a drawer with a key and opened it with one of the keys, a sheet of paper with a code. In Allison's house, you can see the Argent family and Scott having dinner. Gerard, and tell us, Scott, what plans you have for college. Scott, I will study medicine. Gerard, interesting career, some specific branch. Scott, neurosurgery. Gerard, okay. Allison, what will you study? Allison, law. Gerard, okay. How long have you been together? Scott, 1 year. Gerard, and why did you break up? Scott and Allison were silent. With Styles, he had run into Derek and Erica. Derek, where are you going? Styles. With Scott. Allison, and Dad, we have English homework, so. Chris, no problem, go. With Styles. Derek, what did you see that night? Styles, I don't know what you're talking about. Derek, I'm talking about the other night when the mechanic almost died. Styles, it was blurry, but I saw a tail. That thing looked like a lizard and it had scales all over its body. That's when the glass in the ceiling rattles. Derek, it's here. That's when Erica's neck is cut and she falls. Erica, from Derek. Derek, stay still, you'll be okay. Derek and Styles entered the pools. With Scott, he and Allison had left dinner and looked for the book with all the descriptions of the things they had discovered. When they arrived at the office, they saw that everything was normal, but on the desk they saw a drawer with a code. Scott checked his cell phone and saw the code. They opened it, and when they opened it they saw a book. They took it out and left. When they returned to Allison's room, Scott received a call from Styles. Styles, Scott, you have to come to the school pools now. Scott, why? Styles, it's here. Scott is here. Styles hangs up. Allison, go. Scott runs out the window. 10 minutes passed until Scott arrived at the school pools. Scott, Styles. Scott saw how Styles held Derek unconscious in the pool, then he received a call. Allison, Scott is a Kanima shapeshifter. His tail contains a paralyzing toxin and says that he is also human. He cannot remember who he is when he transforms or remember who he kills if he turns this. Scott trapped. Allison, he says that his weakness is the reflection. When he sees himself, he will start to remember. Scott saw how the Kanima tried to grab Styles with his tail. Scott breaks the moon and goes down with a glass that shows it to him and starts screaming. Scott helps Styles and Derek and sees how the Kanima was shedding scales. Derek was getting up. Derek, what is it? Scott, it's a Kanima. Derek thought. Scott, you already knew it was true. Derek, now what I know is that I have to kill it. Scott, no, Derek is human. He doesn't even know who he is. Derek, I don't care. When I see him, I will annihilate him. Derek leaves. Scott and Styles leave, but Scott goes to the hospital to see his mother. Scott was getting off his motorcycle when Gerard appears from behind and tries to stab him with a knife, but it breaks. Scott, what were you trying to do? Gerard, they told me you were strong. I didn't think that much, but still you are at a disadvantage. Scott, seriously, because... Gerard, why don't you look over there? Scott watched as a hunter had a knife on his back and was talking to his mom. Scott, what do you want? Gerard, just for you to work for me. Scott, fine. The hunter stops talking to his mom and walks away. Gerard was leaving until Scott grabbed him by the neck. Scott, listen to me one thing. I will work for you because I have no other choice. What I can assure you is that if you touch a single hair on my mother's head, you will be dead. You and all the little MRD hunters you have, that's clear to you. Gerard nods. Scott, this is going to end badly, and you know it for both you and me. Scott lets go of Gerard and he walks away. Melissa leaves. Melissa, son, everything's okay. Scott, yeah, Mom, let's go. Season 2, Episode 7. It had been 2 months since Scott worked for Gerard. In these months, Scott discovered that Jackson was the Kanima, tried to help him without success. Derek tried to hunt him, and the Master. The Kanima has a master. This master controls the Kanima, but it also has its weaknesses. When they discovered that the master of the Kanima was Math. This one had already been killed by Gerard. And the Kanima went to serve Gerard. Scott, tired, already devised a plan to catch Jackson and Gerard. Styles, it works better. Scott, if it doesn't work, we'll have to kill him. Allison was with Gerard helping him hunt Derek, thinking that he had killed her mother. Lydia, where is it? Scott, they're here. Scott and Styles entered the factory where Gerard and Allison were waiting for them. Scott, Allison, calm down. Allison, no, Scott, they murdered my mother. I won't let it go. Allison shot an arrow at Scott in the leg. Gerard, well done, now bring it back, it should bite me. Allison, what? Chris, he's doing it because he's dying. Allison, Dad? Gerard, another correct guess. I'm dying a disease that has no cure, nor the supernatural could save me, but there is one thing that can. Scott, the bite. Gerard, correct, now come bite me. Scott approached Gerard. Derek, no. Peter, leave it. As Peter was alive because Lydia had the nightmare, and everything that had happened was because of Peter's bite. He had been manipulating Peter to revive him on the full moon, which he achieved. Styles, Scott, don't do it. Chris, we don't know what he could become. Gerard, they won't do anything since the biggest prize, the greatest salvation, is that he doesn't kill his mother, and that Allison stays with him. Everyone saw how Scott grabbed Gerard's arm and bit him. Gerard, ha ha, I did it now, yes. Then Scott's cell phone rings. She's safe. Scott kicks Gerard away from everyone. Gerard, what do you think you're doing? Then Victoria and Melissa enter the factory door. Allison, Mom. Allison was crying. Victoria, daughter, come here, get away from him. Allison walked away from Gerard to run hug her mother. Allison, Mom, how? Victoria, Scott, he helped me along with Deaton. Flashback. At Allison's house. Victoria, do it, Chris, please, I don't want to try to kill them. Chris, no, please, no, Chris cried. Chris held a wolfbane knife in his hand. Chris was about to stab Victoria. Scott, stop, really, you were going to kill the woman you love. Chris, Scott, what are you doing here, go away. Victoria, I don't want to turn into something that can hurt my family. Scott, would I attack my family if you don't want this eaten, and I can help you find a way to stop the transformation? Victoria, how? Scott, with another bite that takes out all the werewolf DNA. Victoria, you can help me. Scott, yes. Chris, come on, what's waiting? Scott, no, you won't. Chris, because. Scott, if Gerard sees that Victoria is alive, he will kill my mother. Chris, him. Scott, I have planned all this. He will use Victoria's death as an excuse to use Allison. Trust me, I can help her, but I need you to stay. Chris agreed. Chris, please. Scott agreed and took Victoria to the vet. Deaton, just in time, Scott, bring her. Put her on the table, Victoria. You're going to feel horrible pain, but it will cancel the transformation. Scott is done. Scott, yes. Deaton, now. Scott bit Victoria in the same place that Derek bit her. Victoria, It was 2 hours of agony for Victoria. When she woke up. Scott, calm down, don't make too much effort, just calm down, try to get up little by little. Victoria, I'm fine because you helped me. Scott, for the simple fact that you are a mother and a daughter cannot lose her mother, just as I do not want to lose mine. Victoria, what do you need? Scott, Gerard has a hunter watching my mother in the hospital, he has a gun eye. Victoria, I understand, I will give you the signal when she is safe. Scott, thank you. End of flashback. Scott, Mom. Scott hugs his mother. Scott, thank you. Victoria, thanks to you. Gerard, it doesn't matter, I already achieved what I wanted. Scott, are you sure? Gerard knelt, and from his wound in his veins a black liquid could be seen. Gerard, what is this? What have you done? Peter, what of? Scott, Gerard always has a plan, but I also have one. I put wolfbane in his pills. Gerard, wolfbane. In that mouth he begins to vomit even more black liquid. Derek, why didn't you tell me? Scott, because you may be an alpha, but you are not mine. Gerard, kill them all. The Kanima tried to cut Allison, but Scott pushed him. Lydia, Jackson. Styles, Lydia. Scott, wait. Lydia shows him some keys. Jackson begins to remember everything and begins to transform. Derek sees Peter, and then Jackson, he nods. Derek saw the opportunity and went through him, and Peter also went through him from behind. They lifted them up and then threw him. Everyone thought that Jackson would be dead. Lydia hugged Styles, but in that of Jackson's cold hands they had claws. Everyone watched as Jackson slowly got up and... Jackson, Scott, you're okay. Jackson, I think now I understand when you said it was hard to transform. Scott, for everything you had to go through, friend. Scott hugs Jackson. Everyone congratulated each other, and Chris took Gerard away. Scott, Derek. Derek, what? Scott, where are Boyd and Erica? Derek, they left my pack. Scott, where did they go? Derek, far away, they said they heard the call of several. Peter, alphas. Scott, and they let them go without further ado. Derek, what were we doing holding them back? Scott, if the alphas are like Peter, ruthless killers. At that roar of pain felt Peter, Derek, Isaac, Jackson, and Scott. Lydia, they are being hunted, you must help them. Scott, Mom, I want you to go to the door in the basement, open it, and stay there for now. Melissa, okay. They all went with Melissa to the basement. Derek, Peter, Isaac, Jackson, and Scott were running through the forest trying to follow the scent of Boys and Erica. After 1 hour of searching, they finally found them. They were injured and scared. Scott, let's get them out of here. At that point, 4 roars were heard. Scott, get them out of here, give me their jacket. They give him Erica's jacket. Scott runs to the other side of the forest as fast as he could, but he saw how he was being caught by the alphas. At that, Scott throws a bit of energy that mows down the alphas and allows him to escape. Scott ran until he got to his house. When he got down, he saw everyone. Scott, they're okay. Allison, yes, and you? Scott, good. I managed to mislead them and send them somewhere else, but they won't stop. They'll keep looking for Derek. Derek, I can take care of myself. Scott, I wasn't saying it for you, I was saying it for them. Because of the way things are going, you won't be able to protect them. Peter, you didn't tell them, or did Derek? Scott, tell us what? Peter, they're a pack of alphas, which means there must be. Scott, an alpha leader. Peter, well, I'm going to sleep. They all said goodbye and left. At Allison's house, Chris had already returned and put away all the things. Allison, you'll put everything away. Chris, if I don't want to know more about being hunters now, we just have to take care of ourselves. Allison, or you could change the code and teach me other tricks, I still don't know everything. Victoria, what would be the new code? Allison, we protect those who can't protect themselves. Chris, we protect those who can't protect themselves, sounds good to me, come here. Allison hugs Chris and Victoria. Season 2 Episode 8 Alpha. It had been 3 months since they defeated Gerard. In these 3 months the Alpha Pack was present throughout Beacon Hills. At school the twins had appeared, causing a furor in the women. Scott and the others were still looking for who was their leader without success at this moment. Scott and the others were preparing an attack on the Alpha's lair. Styles, ready? Scott, yes. Allison? Allison, ready. Jackson? Jackson, ready? Scott, you? Derek/Peter/Isaac/Boyd/Erica, ready. Scott, okay, blind them first, we need Deaton and Styles. Dad, it is clear. All yes. They all jumped, and when they fell they saw the Alphas standing there. They all started to fight. Styles and Allison entered the vault to free Deaton and Styles. Dad. Styles, Dad, Daddy, where are you? Sheriff, Styles. Styles found his dad on the floor injured. Styles, I'll get you out of here calmly. Styles carried his dad and Allison took down Deaton. Deaton, thank you? Allison, thank us when we're safe. Allison and Styles were taking them out. Outside everyone was facing the Alphas. Callie, give up. Callie, they don't stand a chance. Derek, that's what you think. Derek tried to lunge at Callie, but someone else got in the way. Ennis, get away from her. Derek was facing Ennis, but Ennis was stronger and faster. Scott, Derek. Scott and Derek launched themselves at Ennis, throwing him to the ground. With Jackson, Isaac, Boyd, and Erica. Jackson, you want more? Aiden, you think that hurts Beta? Isaac, well, it should. Isaac kicks Aiden, but he doesn't even move. Ethan, you two better leave. Boyd, I'll get my due. Erica, same here. Everyone was fighting. Then Scott and Derek throw Ennis down the escalator in the abandoned mall. Scott and Derek were attacking Ennis, but Callie intervened, hitting Derek and leaving Scott against Ennis. Ennis won at last. Scott tried to release energy, but Ennis didn't give him a break. Scott, damn. Scott was losing, but then a whistle is heard. From the shadows appears. Derek, it is. Peter, it's not. Scott, Deucalion. Derek tried to launch himself at Deucalion but was grabbed by Callie. Callie, don't even move. Scott was standing there looking at Deucalion. Deucalion, you must be Scott. Sorry for the reception, but you came in without asking permission. Scott, you kidnapped our friends. Deucalion, it wasn't just a small moment of weakness for them to feel anger and come towards us. Scott opened his eyes. Scott, Chris, now eh? In that several Reaper arrows began to fall. The Alphas were reaped, but the others didn't since they had visors. Everyone began to come out, but Scott and Derek couldn't. In that Derek, due to Callie's carelessness, breaks free and throws himself against Ennis, digging his claws into his heart and falling into the void. Scott saw all this in slow motion. He tried to grab Derek, but he couldn't, and he saw how Derek fell into the void. Scott, Derek. In that someone grabs him. It was Peter, but he breaks free and tries to go against Deucalion, who was calm and still tried to hit him, but Deucalion grabbed his fist, bringing him closer to him. In that Deaton, who was being carried by Allison, sees how Scott's angry eyes change from gold to fire red. Scott little by little began to win over Deucalion until he pushed him. Scott wanted to continue, but Peter knocked him out in the neck and took him away. Peter, forgive me, Talia. Peter ran with Scott carried on his shoulders until he got out to put him in the jeep and get him out of there. The next day Scott was at school with a stomach ache but getting on the bus. Coach, quickly get on, the basketball and football teams have already left, get on, we have to get to Mystic Falls in 5 hours. They all got on the bus. Scott and Allison sat in the back. Scott sat down and fell asleep. 2 hours passed until Scott got up in pain. Allison, you're okay. Scott, no, it hurts, eh? Allison checks the wound where she saw that it is not healed. Allison, Scott, you are not healing. Scott, I don't know why. Allison, you have to heal. Scott. Scott, I can't. Allison approached Styles. Allison, Styles is Scott. Styles went to see Scott. Styles, oh my god, that looks bad, we need to stop the bus. Styles asked the coach if they could stop, but he said no, so he approached one of his teammates and gave him a rotten sandwich, and 20 minutes later he vomited and they had to stop in a parking lot. Coach, oh my god, or oh my god, wings stinks, son of a hitch. Everyone got off the bus and Allison, Lydia and Styles took Scott to a bathroom where he was suffering from pain. Allison. He can't heal because. Lydia, maybe it's psychological. In many cases they can't heal because of guilt. Maybe Derek's death he thinks is his fault. Styles, Scott, listen to me, it's not your fault. Well, he helped you get out of there, it's not your fault. Scott was still in pain. Allison, I'm going to sew him up, he's not regenerating. Allison took thread and a needle from her backpack and began to sew him up. After closing his wound, she took out gauze and placed it to cover the wound. Scott slowly got up. Allison, how are you? Scott, better. Allison, don't scare me like that again. Allison hugged Scott. Scott, calm down, I won't. That's when Jackson enters. Justin, guys, it's Isaac and Boyd, they are beating Ethan and Aiden. Everyone leaves. Coach, Isaac, stop, Isaac. Erica, Boyd, stop, Boyd, yeah. They kept hitting Ethan and Aiden. Scott, Boyd, Isaac, cack. Scott arrived yelling at them, and they calmed down. Coach, fine, thanks, McCall. Everyone back on the bus now. 5 hours passed and Scott and the others were already arriving at Mystic Falls. Coach, okay, listen, today is the finals. According to the schedule, we will play first, then the basketball team, and finally football. Since the games will be late, we will stay today in Mystic Falls and tomorrow we will leave at noon. Everyone got off the bus and entered Mystic Falls High School. Everyone looked at the students of this high school. Allison, how are you? Scott, I'm better, it's already healing. Styles, what do you think the players will be like? Lydia, I don't know, I just hope we win. Then the Mystic Falls lacrosse players walked by and they were tall and thin. Scott, it doesn't seem like it's going to be that easy. Then the captain of the basketball team walks in, scared. Scott, hey Chad, what's going on? Chad, Scott, we have problems. Scott, what happened? Chad, the captain of the football team got sick and had to leave, and on my team we are missing one to complete the team, otherwise we will be disqualified for lack of players. Scott, I can come into your team to complete it, and in football, Boyd, you and Jackson could help them, can you? Boyd, yes. Jackson, why not? Chad, but you have lacrosse, you will be tired for the other games. Scott, we will be fine, we just need the shirts. Chad, we will get them for you, no problem. Scott, good, just talk to the coach. Scott and the others are going to talk to their coach, and Chad is going to talk to his and about football. When he arrives with the coach. Coach, what do you want? Scott, play on the other teams, they are short of players. Coach, Jackson and Boyd can, but McCall, you are sure? Scott, I will be fine, coach. We will win in lacrosse and then the other sports. Coach, sportsmanship. I like it this way. The other coaches will only favors good. Scott and the others were dating until they met with Lydia. Who is he? Scott, I don't know. Then he walks past and Jackson, Boyd, Erica, Isaac, and Scott feels something strange. Scott, they felt it too. Isaac, yeah? Jackson, he's not a werewolf, it's something else. Scott, we'll find out later. For now. Boyd, he's a player on the football team. Scott, okay, then this final is going to be interesting. They all walk to the cafeteria where they sit down to eat something and then go to the hotel where they would stay for the night. Coach, well, thank Director Victoria for this hotel. Scott, your mom is? Allison, yes, she owns this hotel, so let's go. They all entered, checked in, and went to their rooms except Scott, who accompanied Allison to hers because Victoria asked them to only have one room. Upon entering, they put their things away, change, and leave. Time skip 4H. It was already 6 in the afternoon. Everyone was at Mystic Falls High School. Scott and the others entered the field and saw their friends supporting them. Jackson, let's win, team. Scott, let's win this final, friends. After 1 hour of play, the Beacon Hills team took the victory. Jackson, Nationals, Nationals, Nationals. Players, Nationals, Nationals, Nationals. Allison, congratulations. Scott, thank you. They kiss each other. Lydia, you were amazing. Styles, you think so? Lydia, yes, I think so. Lydia gives him a kiss on the cheek, which makes Styles blush, but he jumps with excitement. Allison, you have to go to the basketball court. Scott, yes, I'm going. Allison, good luck. Allison gives him a kiss. Scott runs off to the basketball court. Chad, you finally arrive, grab your shirt and change into your shoes. Scott, yeah? Scott changed quickly and now he had. Scott, ready? Chad, okay, you'll play power forward with me. Scott, okay. Coach, thanks for being here, McCall. Scott, you're welcome, coach. Scott walks onto the field with Chad and the rest of the Scott players. Chad wins the ball, passes it to Scott. Scott gives it to another of his teammates, and he gives it back to Chad and he scores. Cheerleaders, wow. Chad, okay. Scott, let's go. They played for 48 minutes until the scoreboard hit its last second, ending the game 101-86 in favor of Beacon Hills. Scott, whoa. Chad, yees. Players, let's good. Everyone was celebrating and partying. Scott went up in the stands and kissed Allison. Everyone else celebrated as Scott left. Allison, Styles, and Lydia go to the football field. Scott, where are Jackson and Boyd? Erica, they're already at the field. Everyone was waiting for Mystic Falls to start the game, but nothing. Everyone saw how the coach was worried about one of his players. Scott, something is not right. In that, Scott smells blood inside the high school in the cafeteria. Erica, Scott. Scott, if I smell it too, stay here, don't go, I'll find out who you are. Scott got out of his seat and entered the ventilation ducts to the cafeteria that was already closed and that listen. You will never be able to beat me, Stefan. Stefan, yeah, well, I didn't live 200 years to die with someone like you. We agree on that. Stefan, Elena, what are you doing here? Elena, I wasn't going to leave you alone. Stefan, you can't win, Michael. Michael, that's for me to decide. At that, Michael starts to walk and tries to bite Elena, but Stefan gets in and bites him. Michael, you will never be able to beat me. You know the rules. The older you are, the stronger you are. A young vampire like you will not be able to beat me. Stefan, until I have my last breath, I will not stop fighting for her or for this city. Michael, that's what you wanted. Michael was about to cut Stefan, but Scott comes out of the duct and kicks Michael. Michael, who the hell are you? Scott, okay. Michael, I told you who you are. Michael at incredible speed tried to grab Scott, but he grabbed his hand. Scott, you know, if I had heard the word vampire 2 years ago, I would have been surprised, but not now. Scott became a werewolf. Michael, a werewolf that makes your race around here. Scott, that doesn't concern you. Michael tried to throw a punch in the abdomen, but Stefan kicked him in the face. Stefan, thanks for the help. Scott, say it when we're done with him. They launched themselves at Michael. Michael, you won't be able to defeat me, Salvatore, not if you don't drink blood. Stefan, I will never give up the only thing that makes me human. Scott, wise words. Scott concentrates energy in his hand and throws it at Michael, which destroys his leg. Stefan took advantage of this, and with a stake from one of the tables he pierced Michael's heart, killing him. Elena, he finally died. Elena hugged Stefan and they kissed. Scott, hey, you still have a game outside. Stefan ran out to the field. Scott stayed with Elena talking. Scott, since when do you know about him? Elena, 2 years already. Scott, who was that guy? Elena, an ancient old vampire. Scott, and you love him? Elena, yes, because you ask. Scott, because they were wolves, like they can tell me if you're lying or not. Elena, since when are you a werewolf? Scott, for almost 1.5 years. That's when 2 more people arrive. Season 2, Episode 9, Goodbye Beacon Hills. Scott and Elena were in front of 2 other people. Elena, Damon, Bonnie. Damon, Elena, how are you and Michael? Elena, Stefan died, I killed him. Bonnie, with Michael dead there are only 2 old people left. Scott was leaving. Damon, wait, doggy. Damon tried to grab Scott's shoulder, but Scott grabbed his hand. Scott, be careful. Damon, seriously. Damon tried to kick him, but Scott blocked it with his leg and hit him in the abdomen, sending him with Bonnie. Damon, I should have been careful, that hurt. Elena, calm down. Damon helped Stefan beat Michael. Damon, so good. Elena, what did I tell you about my proposal? Damon grabbed him by the neck. Scott, why flirt with a girl you don't love? Damon, what are you talking about? Scott, vampire or you have no heart, and when you talk to Elena it is not the same way as when Stefan talks to her. Damon, stay out of it. Scott, why make your brother suffer? Damon tried to hit him. Damon, you wouldn't understand. Scott, I don't know what, they fought over a woman that your brother saved you from dying. If a brother doesn't do that, I don't know what. Damon, he cursed me. Scott, that being immortal is a curse. When I became a werewolf I tried to kill my family, but I controlled myself and I was able to handle it because you didn't have 200 years to do it, and yet you do nothing. Stop blaming others when it's your fault. Damon, Scott threw him away. Then another woman arrives. Elena, Caroline. Caroline, Damon, are you okay? Damon, yes, I'm fine. Scott saw how his heart was beating. Scott, haha, lie to yourself as many times as you think, Damon, but you can't lie to your heart. Scott went to watch the game when at the end the Beacon Hills players were celebrating. Jackson, wow. Scott, well done. Jackson, I'll buy the drink tonight. Scott, wow. Scott approached Stefan. Scott, good game. Stefan, your wolf friends are very tough to get through. Scott, good game, Stefan. Scott and Stefan shake hands. Then Stefan sees Damon. Scott, he's a little impulsive and an idiot, but deep down he considers you his brother. Maybe the resentment won't go away today, but I assure you that it will soon. Stefan looked at him. Scott, Elena, when she starts talking she doesn't stop. Stefan, ha, it's true. Scott, we'll see each other again time. Stefan, I say the same. Scott. Scott and Stefan bumped fists. Allison, where were you? Scott, helping some fangs. Allison, they are. Scott, this planet holds more secrets than you think. Scott turned and saw Stefan with Elena and Damon with Caroline. In that Scott was passing, but Bonnie crashes into him. Scott, sorry. In that Bonnie froze. Scott, hey, are you okay? Bonnie tells him. Bonnie, I'll wait for you on the roof of your hotel tonight, we have to talk. And she left. Scott and Allison returned to the hotel to celebrate when everyone was celebrating. Scott. I'll be right back. Allison, where are you going? Scott, I'll be back in a while. Scott left and went up to the roof where Bonnie was waiting for him. Scott, what did I want to talk about? Bonnie, you have to be careful. Scott, what do you mean? Bonnie, in your city Beacon Hills there are strange creatures. Scott, more than werewolves, ha. Bonnie, there is a tree in the forest of Beacon Hills. You will not find it if you want to use it, but if you just look for it to understand it, you will find it. From this tree he saved 2 creatures. One was brought back to life, and the other was released. Only a true alpha can close this tree, otherwise all kinds of weirdness will fall on your city. Scott, I understand, thanks for your help. Bonnie, wait, this witch is already at your school. Scott became serious. Scott, I'll have to stop her then. Bonnie, I'll help you with that. Bonnie approached him and kissed him. Scott immediately separated her. Scott, what are you doing? Bonnie, with that kiss you will be able to feel all the weirdos that are not like you. Scott, you should have warned me. Bonnie, you're not that bad of a kisser either. Scott, I'm in a relationship now. Bonnie, you still don't understand, and when you find out, you find me. Scott went down and looked for Allison at the party, but he didn't find her. When he went up to his room, he saw Allison sitting. Scott, Allison, what happened? Allison, you liked her. Scott, like what? Allison, the kiss she gave you. Scott, of course not. Allison, you know I love you. She only kissed me because she wanted to give me power. Allison, then why does it hurt me? Scott hugs Allison. Scott, Allison, I loved you. I will love you today, tomorrow, and always. Scott kissed her, and she reciprocated. The kiss was tender and passionate. Little by little it began to heat up more until Scott picked up Allison and took her to bed. Scott, I love you. Allison just kissed him, and so they spent the night together. The next day they left Mystic Falls and the Steiner brothers sat in front of Scott. Scott, what do they need? Ethan, help. Scott, like help after what they did. Aiden, we suspect that Derek is still alive. Ethan, but if we find him, or he joins us since he killed another alpha, or Deucalion kills him. Scott, and what do they want help with? Ethan, we need protection. We don't want to continue with Deucalion, but if we leave, Deucalion could kill us. Aiden, Derek is alpha, we could join his pack. Ethan, help us, Scott. Scott talked to everyone and they agreed to help them. Scott, what is Deucalion planning? Ethan, revenge. Scott, on who? Ethan, on those who did that to his eyes. When everyone arrived at Beacon Hills, each one went home. 4 months passed where Scott tried to find the witch, but he couldn't. She was well hidden. During this time, Scott became a basketball player too. Scott trained well so much that one night he was able to transform into Super Saiyan, so he continued searching for the witch without result, but he did find the other creature in a port trying to kill policemen. Scott, so you were the one who escaped from the Nemeton. You came to kill me, Najitsun. Scott, I came to put you out of your misery. Najitsun, seriously, a Najitsun never dies. Even if my body is destroyed, my spirit will always be there. Scott, you won't hurt anyone else. Scott kicked him and sent him to the port, where he threw him into the water and launched an attack, destroying his body completely. In that he saw how a black moth flew, grabbed it, and destroyed it with energy. Scott left from there. At school. Ethan, Scott. Scott, tell me. Ethan, we found where Deucalion wants to do his plan. Scott, where? Aiden, where they betrayed him. Styles, Scott. Lydia discovered something else. Lydia, Professor Jennifer was a druid of the Kali clan, but she survived. That was when the Nemeto saved her. She plans to kill all the werewolves tonight with the red moon. This will take away the power from all the werewolves. Scott, I understand. She will surely go for Deucalion first. There we will find them all. Scott saw Allison, but she acted in a different way, distant from him. Instead, when she was with Isaac, he saw her happy. Scott's heart hurt, but he already knew what was happening. Allison was becoming interested in Isaac. Scott's dad had already returned. They were building the FBI station. Styles had managed to pass the academy exam. Styles had confessed to Lydia and she had accepted her feelings and they had become a couple. Jackson accepted his sexuality and confessed that he was homosexual and began a relationship with Ethan. No one bothered. At night, Jennifer had already started her plan. Jennifer, werewolves will die. When the blood moon began, Scott, Deucalion, Jackson, Isaac, Erica, Derek, and Peter lost their powers. Jennifer had transformed into something else. Jennifer, the power is mine. Derek got scared because he had fallen in love with her. Scott tried to get through but he couldn't because the ground was covered in serval dust. Jennifer, it's useless, you won't be able to get through. Scott was upset trying to get through but he couldn't, but he still kept trying and getting burned, but little by little he started to get through. Jennifer, what is this? Scott, AAA. As everyone watched as she slowly broke the spell and her eyes changed. Scott, ah. Scott broke the serval circle. Jennifer, what? Scott, I'm an alpha now, you better stop this because I'll kill you. I don't care about the color of my eyes. Deucalion, it won't change the color of mine, let me. Deucalion tried to kill her but Scott grabbed him. Scott, don't come closer. Scott approached Jennifer. Derek, Scott, wait. Scott grabbed her and pierced her chest. Derek, no. Scott took out his fist but no blood came out, blue energy came out. Jennifer on the floor was coughing. Derek, Jennifer. Jennifer, what happened? Scott, this thing belongs to the Nemeton, that thing that saved you before. I have to take care of that now. Scott left there quickly and entered the forest. I want to understand you. In that the forest began to sound and the leaves moved in one direction. Scott followed them and saw the felled tree on the ground. Scott approached and put the energy that he took from Jennifer. The tree absorbed it. Scott, what are you? Scott put his hand out and began to have visions of a woman who was burned exactly here for practicing magic. Scott, no, that's not possible. You were from England. What were you doing here, Merlin? In that he saw how he was murdered and hung, and then he saw how his blood turned into roots and a huge tree grew. Scott, you were the one who helped many people, but you also freed many others. You can't continue like this. I have to signal you. Scott took out of his backpack a sign that he created in the bunker and placed it on the tree. It shined completely and then it grew and became a tree as it was before. Scott, if someone needs you for tricks and good things, help them. Scott with his claws put a sign on the tree and left. Scott went to school and saw how Isaac took Allison's father to his house. Scott, how is he? Allison, we found him in time. Scott, can we talk? Scott felt a pang in his heart. Scott, sure. Allison, I don't know how to say it. Scott, just say it. Allison, I need time. Scott, no, I can't continue with you. I'm sorry. Allison cried. Scott, hey, it's okay, I understand you and I can wait until you're ready. Allison, it's that I. Scott, it's because of Isaac, right? Allison lowered her head. Scott, you don't have to hang your head, it's not your fault. It's okay if you have feelings for another person, it's normal. I'll leave you to clear your ideas. Scott gives her a short kiss on the lips and leaves. Lydia hugs Allison. Scott walks through the halls crying, then his mind begins to explode and he starts to sing. The day the door is closed. The echoes fill your soul. They won't say which way to go. Just trust your heart. To find why you're here for. Open another door. But I'm not sure anymore. It's just so hard. Voices in my head. Tell me they know best. I don't know where to go. What's the right team? I want my own thing. I want my own thing. I can't choose, so confused. What's it all mean? I want my own dream. So bad I'm gonna scream. Oh ah. Scott was thinking in his mind until his friend arrives. Styles, Scott. Scott, hey Styles, your dad is okay. Styles, yes, he's at home resting. Scott, well Styles, I've been thinking this for a long time. Deaton told me that now that I'm an alpha I can turn several into werewolves, but to be careful, That's what he told me. Styles, what are you getting at? Scott, Styles, 2 weeks ago they announced that we are at war and that they needed our help. Styles, you won't? Scott, I don't want the city or my friends to get hurt, so I talked to my uncles who are in charge of recruiting. They told me that if I could surprise the recruiter tomorrow I could only go, and no one else here would have to go. Styles, Scott, listen to me if you're going. Scott, I know, but that way you could be safe. Styles, yes, it's for Allison. Scott, it's not because of her. My whole life I thought I had no direction, a path to study medicine then work, and that's all. Styles, I want my life to have meaning and I need to protect this planet. I promised her, I said I would protect this planet and its inhabitants from any threat, and I think it's time to keep what I promised. Styles was crying. Styles, Scott, you. Scott, calm down. Scott hugged Styles. Styles, you know you're my brother. Scott, lose, that's why I want to protect you too. Styles, what do you mean? Scott, Jackson, Isaac, Ethan, Aiden, Erica, Boyd, Derek, Peter are werewolves. Lydia is a banshee. Allison and her family can take care of themselves just like they can their families. My dad will protect Mom, plus the house is well insured, but not you. That's why I want to do this. Scott bites Styles and he falls to the ground. Styles, what? After 5 minutes Styles was getting up. Styles, Scott, what? Scott, with that you can protect yourself and Beacon Hills. Styles, you are smart, and you think quickly under pressure. I'm sure he will be a good alpha. Steals, wait, what? Scott bites Styles again on the neck. Styles' eyes started to change. Scott, they'll need someone to guide them. Go with Derek, he'll teach you everything. Styles, Scott. Scott, I'm going to miss you, bro. Scott and Styles hug once more. Scott goes home and talks to his parents, and takes them to the bunker. Raphael, what did you want to talk to us about, son? Scott, I'll list tomorrow. Melissa, no, Noel. Scott, Mom, please, I have to if it's so that you'll be okay. Melissa, and what about you, you'll be okay. Scott, Mom, I'm stronger than you think, that's why I brought you here. Scott shows them his training. Raphael, why didn't you tell us any of this? Scott, I didn't want you to worry anymore. I talked to my uncles, they are in charge of recruiting. Melissa, they are why? He said it crying. Scott hugs his parents. Scott, I'll be fine, I promise to come back. Melissa and Raphael hug their son tightly. Scott falls asleep in the living room on the floor next to his parents like he did when he was little. The next day Scott was getting up and says goodbye to his parents and his pet QB and leaves his house, but sees Styles, Jackson, Derek, Isaac, Erica, Boyd, Aiden, Peter, and Ethan waiting for him. Derek, that's true, Scott. Scott, yes. Derek, it's your decision, I can only say good luck. Scott, thanks. Peter, I know we were enemies once, but good luck, McCall. Scott, Derek, I want you to teach Styles everything you've learned just like you, Peter. Derek, because him. At that Styles takes out his claws and transforms. Scott, he will be the alpha of the pack, is the one I trust the most, and the one I would bet my life on. Trust him just like I trust you. Everyone felt and said goodbye to Scott, hugging him. Styles took Scott to the recruiting office. Scott, it was a pleasure, brother. Styles, take care of yourself there and come back. Styles hugs Scott. Scott, I'll have it. Scott walks in and sees several people forming in that. He passes everyone and talks to the recruiter. Recruiter, get in your civilian line. Scott, sir, I'm here on behalf of my uncle Thor and Loki. Recruiter, so you're the one who's going to stop all of them from enlisting? Scott, yes, sir. Recruiter, well, let's see what you got. The recruit takes him to the punching machine. Recruiter, this machine measures your strength. Scott, good. Scott braces himself and throws a strong punch, which destroys the machine and several walls. The recruiter was impressed. Recruiter, well, if you can do a magic attack that's strong enough to break that wall, I'll stop recruiting in this town. Scott, good. Scott gets into position. Scott, Kamehameha. Scott destroys the wall and several trees until he reaches a mountain and destroys it as well, moving all of Beacon Hills. Recruiter: Well, Mr. McCall, it seems that your uncles were not wrong about you. You can go. Everyone was sighing and crying with happiness for not going to war. Recruiter: When you get on that bus, there will be no turning back. Scott remembered everything that happened here to his parents, his friends, and Allison. With Styles, he had returned to Scott's house to see his parents, but he saw Allison and Lydia get out of the car. Styles: Allison, what are you doing? Allison: Where is Scott? Styles tells her everything. Allison: Why no, where's Styles? Styles: At the enlistment base. Allison got in her car and started driving as fast as she could. Lydia: Do you think she'll catch him? Scott: I hope so, because she was looking for him. Lydia: Allison was under a magic spell. Jennifer went to her house this morning to tell her. Styles: Or not. In that they saw the mountain explode. Lydia: What was that? Styles: That was Scott, always surprising everyone. Lydia and Styles entered Scott's house. With Allison, she didn't care about the explosion and kept driving. Allison: Please, Scott, no, don't go, let me tell you. Allison remembered everything that happened with Scott. Recruiter: And well, soldier, what are you waiting for? Scott: I'm going, sir. Scott slowly climbed the stairs of the bus and finished climbing them to sit in the back. Recruiter: Fine, let's go. The bus had left along the highway. Allison had arrived at the recruiting center and saw how everyone was happily leaving with their parents. Allison: Excuse me, haven't you seen a tall brown-haired boy named Scott? Civilian: Yes, he was the one who saved us from going to war. The bus has already gone east on the highway. Allison got into her car and left. With Scott. Scott remembered everything that had happened since he had arrived in Beacon Hills, and how happy he is in this city. Scott: How many things we went through in this city. Scott was sitting on the bus looking out the window until. Recruiter: We will go to Lee Field in Virginia. Beacon Hills will be discharged as a soldier. Try to sleep, it will be a 6-hour trip. Scott just looked out the window until a car blocked the military bus. Recruiter: But what the hell is going on outside? Scott: Point me in. Katniss: 200 meters. 100 meters is right below you. Scott punches the ground, breaking it, and falls off the ground. Katniss: It's a mutt, it's 120 meters tall. At that, the mutt pushed his back. Scott: Focus on defending the city, I'll take care of it. Scott pushed the monster into the sea where he tried to eat him, but Scott dodges it by punching it in the face, stunning it. Scott pulls out his 2 swords. Scott: It's time to cut down a monster. With the Major. Azazel: Major, who is he? Major: Captain Scott McCall, one of my best soldiers. Odin: How much is his strength? The mutts are difficult to push, even for Thor. Major: His strength is incalculable, his speed is equally incalculable, and his powers unknown. Michael: If you don't know where he came from. Major: His information was deleted from the database. Surzek: How is that possible? Major: He asked me for it, it was in favor he asked of me. Odin: He could be a spy for the Cows Brigade. Major: Sir, I assure you that I would not risk my life for it. Azazel: He is under your responsibility. At that, an explosion is heard. Major: Scott answers what happened. Scott: Muto eliminated, sir. At that, everyone sees the screens and sees that the Muto was headless. Major: Good, we are close, protect the city while. At that, an explosion is heard on the south side. Major: English captain respond English captain, what happened? English captain: Sir, they entered, we can't take them all. Major: Use the escape circles, return to the base, and hold on, there is not much left before we arrive. Captain: At your command, sir. The captain does it. Scott: No. Major: Scott, what happened? Scott: The citizens are between the base and the south zone. Annabeth: Captain, we can go here. Scott was flying towards the citizens who were about to be evacuated and saw how the enemies were about to arrive. Scott, they won't pass. Scott falls in the middle of them and begins to kill them. Major, Scott, hold on, there is little left. Scott continued killing them but sees how several xenomorphs had entered the evacuation zone. Scott creates 3 clones and leaves them fighting. Scott walks in and sees a xenomorph about to kill 2 girls. Season 2, Episode 13, Horrors of War. The girls closed their eyes expecting the worst, but they felt nothing. Scott, they're okay. The girls opened their eyes and saw that Scott had received the cut. Scott, it's okay. They agreed. Scott, fine, excuse me. Scott cut the xenomorph in half. Scott, go. Scott sees more xenomorphs entering, cuts them and leaves the evacuation zone. Scott, Major, they were the last ones. Major, yes. Scott, good. In that, a Leviathan ship hits Scott and crashes him into the ground, dragging me down. Scott, damn. Major, Scott. Soldier, sir, we lost the signal with Captain Scott. Major, damn, how long to get there? Soldier, 20 minutes, sir. Scott destroys the Leviathan and goes up. When he goes up, he sees how everyone was being overwhelmed, how several used their magic escape circles and how others were injured and others helped him. Scott was dizzy, in that another Leviathan ship crashes into him and throws him down. Scott starts having flashbacks to his parents, to his friends, to Styles, to his uncles, to Allison. Scott, YA. Scott emerges from underground and everything lights up. A light reached the sky, breaking through the clouds of dust that the war had raised. Scott quickly created 40 clones and began to destroy everyone who was there. Scott destroyed everyone who crossed his path. Chitauri xenomorph ships destroyed everything until they reached the main ship. Scott was going to enter to destroy everything, but a ray from that ship sent Scott to the ground. Even more upset, he released more ki and transformed again. Scott and his clones together fired Kamehameha towards the ship. Scott hit the ship's shield, destroying his shield. When he was going to go for the ship, everyone launched themselves against him. The ship also fired at him. Scott resisted all the attacks he received. Scott, that's it. Kurama, ready. Scott releases a signal, and along with it his eyes turn orange. Scott creates even more clones, and all the xenomorphs begin to be destroyed. The clones created several futons, Ras and shuriken, launching them against the Leviathans who fell. Scott continued fighting against all the soldiers of other divisions. Saw Scott fighting and seeing the advantage, they launched themselves too. Hey Mitch, Captain, we are here. Scott sees that everyone was attacking. Major, well done Scott, we finally arrived. All the ships were destroyed by the Alliance. Major, prepare the beam. Soldier, 10 seconds for the beam. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beam at maximum power. The beam that was fired from the ship destroyed the ships and crashed into the main ship but did not destroy it. Soldier, sir, the main ship is holding. Major, damn it. Scott was destroying the Leviathans when he saw the beam from the ship, but he did not destroy the ship. Scott, clones. Clones, yes sir. Scott, with everything to that damned ship. Clones, yes sir. The clones created futon Ras and shuriken jutsus, and prepared the Kamehameha. Scott, it's over. Kamehameha. The clone attacks plus Scott's, and the ship's attack ended up destroying the ship. Scott, damn. Scott was standing, the clones disappeared and walked backwards while in the sky all the ships that were left to be destroyed were destroying themselves. Major, well done Captain McCall. Scott, thank you sir. Major, return to base for checkups and healing. Scott walked through the battlefield where he saw dead xenomorphs and Chitauri, but also dead soldiers. Scott, guide these men along the path to reach Valhalla, where they will be received with drinks and applause, since these brave men and women, husbands and wives, friends, fathers and mothers, have fought with honor and pride until the end. May they rest in your beautiful gardens. Scott continued walking and met his squad. Cisco, Captain. Scott, everyone is okay. Tom, yes Captain. Scott, good job, let's go back to base. When they returned, they saw several being treated and others drinking water. Captain Ingalls, Captain McCall, I'm sorry we left like this. Scott, don't worry, Captain, the good thing is that you are safe. Ryan, good job, Captain McCall. Scott, thank you, Captain Ryan. Scott approached the Major. Scott, Major. Major, Captain McCall, good job. Scott, thank you, sir. Can I ask how many casualties? Major, overall 357 deaths. Scott, I understand, sir. Major, I know you feel bad, Scott, but war is like that, not everyone can survive. Scott, even so, if I had entered alone, no one would have died. Major, if that were the case, you would have died. Scott said goodbye and went to see his squadron. When he arrived, he saw how his brother Brandon was being healed. Scott, what happened to him? Katniss, when you took the myth, he wanted to destroy a Leviathan ship, but he didn't know about its shields, so he fell with his armor. Scott, for God's sake, they send us children from the DXD group. Sarah, enough of insulting us, don't you think? Scott, we do not insult you, we simply call you children because that is what you are. You came here to hinder, better go back to killing renegade demons in your city, this is too much for you. Scott left there, leaving Brandon upset but the others with their heads down. Scott was walking thinking. Annabeth, what is bothering you so much, Captain? Scott, there is something I don't like. Katniss, what is it? Scott, there have been no evil dragons or demons, or fallen a few, but no more than what is happening. Ryan, Captain McCall. Scott, tell me. Ryan, they wanted to thank you. Scott looks at the girls he saved earlier. Joe Seo, I'm Joey Seo, thanks for saving us. Sue, I'm Sue Muching, thanks for saving us. Scott, don't worry, there's nothing to thank you for, your fine, right? Joe Seo, yes, thanks to you. Scott, okay, go get checked up and then find your family. Sue Muching, thank you. Scott walked and sat by a bonfire. Ryan, it's 4 p.m. and drinking. Scott, we finished this right, so I want to drink. English Captain, let's drink together then. The squads bring drinks and games. Ryan, Scott, and English Captain toast. Ryan, to the fallen and those yet to fall. Scott/English Captain, to the fallen and those yet to fall. Everyone drank. 30 minutes passed and the alarms started ringing. Scott quickly ran to the Major. Scott, Major, what's going on? Major, it was a distraction, the battle here. The Cows Brigade launched a worldwide attack. England, Russia, China, France, Japan, Spain, Portugal, the leaders would help, but the underworld, Grigory, Asgard, and Tokyo are also being attacked. Brandon, what about Ko? Major, apparently not, but the underworld is in trouble. Sarah, let's go now. Brandon, Max, Sarah, and Rias create a magic circle and leave. Scott, Mr. Beacon Hills. Major, okay, but Pearl Harbor won't hold out any longer, its shields are falling. Scott, Cisco. Cisco, yes, Captain. Scott, could you create a portal big enough for everyone to pass through and get to Pearl Harbor? Cisco, yes, but it would take time. Scott, how long? Scott, 1 hour. Scott, start now. Cisco, yes, Captain. Major, soldier, take him to the last USS so he can create the portal. Major, they won't hold out that long, the shields are about to fall. Scott, Tom, take care of the squad, I'm going. Major, Scott, if you go alone. Scott, if I don't go and they destroy Pearl Harbor, not only Beacon Hills will be attacked, every city in the country will be attacked. I have to do it. Katniss, be careful, Scott. Scott, yes. Scott puts his fingers on his forehead and disappears. Major, Private Ramon, do you think that portal is there? Soldiers, help him. Ryan, sir, we must also return to our countries. Major, we have no way to get them back. English Captain, yes, there is Gypsy. Gypsy, Captain. English Captain, take all the squadrons to defend your country. Gypsy, yes, sir. With Scott, he had arrived at Pearl Harbor and saw how the shields had already fallen and the enemies had crossed the first line, destroying everything in their path, and how they were about to reach the hospital. Scott, they will all die here. Scott teleports to the hospital and reactivates the shields with his magic. Addison, Scott. Scott, take the wounded inside, the army will arrive soon. Gabriella, what about you? There are many. Scott, I'll be fine. In that case, the main ship leaves. Shelba, idiot, you only condemned yourself to your death, you won't be able to hold out much longer, give up. Shelba sent several fallen dragons and demons to attack when they all launched their attacks at the same time as Scott appeared without the top of his suit, and with burns. Scott, this holds my body. The excessive consumption of ki and chakra takes away my body's resistance. Scott was holding himself with his sword. Addison, Scott. Gabriella, Scott. Kurama, you're going to do it right, Scott. Scott, it doesn't matter if the whole world sees me, it doesn't matter if they find out who I really am, I just want to protect them. Kurama, let's give it our all, Scott, up to 100% and surpass our limits. Scott, we won't let them pass. Scott, Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu. Scott created 200 clones. Scott, even if I have to destroy my body, even if I have to sacrifice myself again and again, even if all my steps are uncertain, even if I fail many times, I will follow my instincts and never give up. I will overcome everything, even if I can return, even if I have to give my body to the same hell to be a version of myself without mistakes, so that everyone can look to the future and move on with their lives. That's why I will not give up now or ever. Right now I will surpass my limits. Scott and his clones launch themselves against everyone. The clones take everyone apart with no chance for them to counterattack. Shelba, idiots waiting to kill him. Scott and the clones continue to advance. Scott now. All the clones transformed into SSJ, put away their weapons, and now they killed them with their fists and techniques. Shelba, damn idiots, but don't think you have the advantage, I also brought something special. Shelba creates a magic circle from where it comes out. Shelba, let's see what you do with that. Inside the shields, everyone was scared. Scott, Kuchios no Jutsu. A large cloud of smoke formed. Kurama, ROERRRRRR. Scott, kill him, Kurama. Kurama, take it for granted. Kurama launched himself against the kaiju and threw him towards the sea, where he began to bite him and hit him with his komas. Scott was finishing off the enemy army. Shelba, damn you, I better get out of here. Scott, where do you think you're going? Scott grabbed Shelba and threw him to the ground. Shelba tried to throw a Rasayo of destruction at him, but Scott grabbed his hand and threw him back into his nothingness, and then jumped, and with a Kamehameha destroyed the ship. Shelba, damn it. Shelba tried to run away in a magic circle, but Scott broke the circle and kicked him. Shelba, wait, I'll give you whatever you want, money, women, riches, whatever you want. Scott, what I want is your death. Scott threw a ray of energy into his stomach. Scott, look at all this. Shelba saw the whole field as there were civilians and his army dead. Scott, nobody will give these people their lives back, all because of you, damn idiot, all the families that will suffer because of you. Scott, only a tear, and Shelba saw his eyes. Scott, you don't deserve your existence. Shelba, I am Shelba Beelzebub, son of the former Mao Beelzebub, and you. Scott, I do not care who you are, I do not care about your titles or your achievements, to me you are just a bastard who must die. Scott takes out his sword and runs Shelba through the heart, killing him. Scott looks to the sea and sees the kaiju split in half. Scott, good job. Kurama, it was easy to kill, but it was something strong. Scott, rest. Kurama disappears in a cloud of smoke. In that, a huge portal opens and the army, the plans, the USS, and the entire fleet appear. Scott knees before the dead and bows in respect, and then gets up. Major, Scott, do you hear me? Scott, loud and clear, Major. Major, good work here, but... Scott, what happened? Major, we lost France, Portugal, and Italy. Scott saw the sky and then the dead. Scott, the horrors of war will never end unless one puts an end to it on their own. Season 2, Episode 14, D-Day. Scott was looking at the Major. Major, we know that they took France, Portugal, and Italy. Scott, what happened to China, Russia and England. Major, they managed to repel the attack. They are fine and they sent soldiers as soon as they could. They sent their army to the coasts of Normandy. Once France is taken, it will be easier to recover Portugal and Italy. But they will be waiting for us. It will be a bloodbath. Scott, we have no choice, and the civilians. Major, they managed to evacuate almost the majority, but there are still civilians hiding in the drains and destroyed buildings. Scott, how many? Major, 12,000 civilians hiding asking for help throughout France. Scott, there is already a team. Major, yes, the DXD team will be in charge of rescuing the civilians and bringing them safely. Scott, you are going to send those children to do the job. Major, don't raise your voice to me, Captain, I have a higher rank than you, owe me respect. In that a screen is activated. Overall, respect is earned, Major. Major, General. Everyone greeted. General, rest for you, Scott, we have another mission. Scott, which, sir? General, we detected an underground base beneath their central base in Paris. Apparently they are developing some kind of bioweapon. From what it is understood, they are using Fenrir for their purposes. Scott, excuse me, the Fenrir wolf was not with the White Dragon. General, no, the White Dragon was ambushed and wounded. They took Fenrir from him. Scott, I understand. General, it is not a normal mission, Captain Scott. You should not leave anyone alive down there. Scott, I understand, sir. I have a request. General, what is it? Scott, leave my position to my lieutenant. General, are you sure? Scott, completely. General Katniss Everdeen has the skill to carry this position and lead the team. General, well approved, your men will be. Scott, no sir, from what I understand this mission is total extermination. I do not need anyone else, I go alone. Major, you are crazy, it would be a suicide mission. General, are you sure of what you say, soldier? Scott, yes sir. General, well, the mission is authorized, you can equip yourself and leave as soon as possible. Scott, General. General, tell me. Scott, if I destroy your experiment, they will know that I have already infiltrated the city and will kill the hostages they have. General, what do you suggest? Scott, a rescue mission and an extermination mission. General, are you sure what you say, soldier? There will be no turning back. Scott, completely sure, General. General, well, equip yourself as soon as possible. Scott, yes, sir. General, Major, you will inform your team of the mission and Captain Scott's decision. Scott, sir, me. General, you are no longer captain now, you are Captain Lieutenant Soldier. Scott, yes, sir. Scott left there and went to get ready. When he was talking to the armorer, 4 girls spoke to him. Addison, Scott, where are you going? Gabriella, you just finished a battle. Annabeth, Captain, the Major just informed us. Katniss, because he left his position as captain. Scott, I am now Captain Lieutenant. Everyone was surprised and saw him. Scott, I must go on a mission to France. Katniss, and his squad. Scott, I'm going alone. Everyone was even more surprised. Katniss, Captain, you can't do that, going alone is a suicide mission. Scott, the mission is infiltration, rescue and extermination, I must do it alone. Addison, Scott, no, wait. Scott, I'll be fine. Katniss, take care of this squad. Annabeth, help her with those troublemakers. Addison, Gabriella, give my regards to the doctor and take care of yourselves, yeah. The girls hugged Scott. Scott, it's time. Scientist, your new armor has a cloaking system implemented for your mission. Scott, thank you. Scott gets into an Osprey. And the door closes while the girls looked at Scott. Scott sits in the pilot's seat. Scott, Osprey 36 clearance to leave. Command, Osprey 36 clearance cleared. Scott, engines ready, door closed. Scott took off the Osprey. Scott drove the Osprey and activated the cloaking system and watched as the Alliance fought off the coast of Normandy. Scott, they won't get through unless they destroy those turrets. Scott put the Osprey on autopilot and jumped out. As he landed, he used a Kamehameha and destroyed the turrets. As the turrets fell, the Alliance advanced faster. Scott flew back to his Osprey. Major, it was your truth McCall. Scott, yes, sir. Major, good job. Scott, thank you, sir. Major, how much for your mission? Scott, 3 hours to get to Paris, but I will land before arriving. I do not want them to detect the Osprey. Major, good. When you arrive, contact will be lost due to the Chitauri signal. Good luck. Scott, see you, Mr. McCall, outside. Scott cuts the transmission. In Beacon Hills, Allison was watching television. Journalist, we just received a video from one of the survivors of the attack on Pearl Harbor. They showed the video of how Scott was resisting the bullets and laser cuts, missiles and shots. Allison couldn't believe it. Allison, Dad, Mom. Chris and Victoria went down and watched television. Chris, we must tell Raphael and Melissa. Victoria called Raphael and Melissa. When she answered, they told them to turn on the television. When Raphael and Melissa saw how Scott was being attacked, they cried, but then Scott got up. Scott, even if I have to destroy my body, even if I have to sacrifice myself over and over again, even if all my steps are uncertain, even if I fail many times, I will follow my instincts, and I will never give up. I will overcome everything, even if I can't go back, even if I have to give my body to the same hell to be a version of myself without mistakes, so that everyone can look to the future and move on with their lives. That's why I will not give up now or ever. Right now I will overcome my limits. They saw how Scott created more clones of himself and launched himself against his enemies. Journalist, thanks to this brave soldier, Pearl Harbor was saved, but the question is, who is this soldier, and where is he now? Raphael and Melissa were relieved that he is okay, but they were also scared. Allison, where do you think he is? Raphael, if you can come, I'll call Thor. Allison, let's go there. Melissa, call Styles. After 1 hour, everyone was gathered at Scott's house. Raphael took out a scroll and put his blood on it. When he did so, the Bifrost opened and Thor arrived. Thor, Raphael is fine. Everyone is fine. Raphael, yes, we just wanted to ask you something. Thor, what a thing. Raphael, where is my son? Thor, this will take a while. Sit down. They all sat down. English, Thor. When Scott arrived at Camp Lee, he trained for 1 month. Then Captain Glover sent him to the Viper Squadron in Pearl Harbor, the first advance line of the Army. When he managed to get there, he trained with this squadron, and Major McCauley named him captain of the Viper Squadron. Then they went to Korea, where they defended Seoul from the attack. Scott managed to help civilians caught in the crossfire to escape. Thor shows them a hologram of how he fought. Styles, I'd never seen him like that. His hair color is blonde. Thor, it's a power that only he knows, but he has used it for almost the entire time the battle lasted. He also met his brothers. Raphael and Melissa were surprised. Thor, they don't know what Scott is. Raphael and Melissa sighed in relief. Thor showed them the fight he had with his brothers and how he reprimanded them for being conceived, and they saw how Max tried to attack him, but Scott deconverted him. Styles, don't mess with the Alpha. Peter, it's weird that Scott's power works with yokai. Derek, because you say so. Peter, because we werewolves are very far from the yokai. If the Alpha's Howl managed to do that to a yokai, Scott must be stronger than what he told us. Thor, when they managed to destroy the main ship of the invasion, Scott went to see the wounded and saw the Major worried. When he approached him, the Major told him that the attack on Seoul was just a distraction. He shouldn't tell them this, but soon the news will also say the attack on Seoul was a distraction for the Chaos Brigade Army to attack other countries. Allison, a distraction. Thor, the Chaos Brigade took France, Portugal, and Italy. The Alliance immediately launched a counterattack in retaliation, but the general sent Scott to something else. When Thor said this, everyone was surprised. Melissa, what thing? Thor, Scott is infiltrating Paris for a rescue and extermination mission. Styles, rescue of who? Thor, rescue of civilians taken hostage by the Chaos Brigade. Jackson, an extermination of who? Thor shows a hologram. Thor, we know that in the underground they have a laboratory full of experiments, but the one that matters most to us is the room where they have Fenrir. Allison, the god-killing wolf. Thor, yes, we know that they are experimenting with their blood and their strength to create bioweapons. Melissa, at least Scott is with his squad. Thor, he is not. Lydia, what do you mean he is not like that? Thor, Scott left Katniss Everdeen in command as captain of the Viper Squadron. The general named him captain as lieutenant of Major Macaulay, but he decided to do the mission alone. Melissa, like he decided to do the mission alone because they didn't stop him. Thor, the general tried but Scott decided to do the mission alone. In the end the decision was Scott's. Thor shows them the last recording of Scott saying goodbye to Addison, Gabriella, Katniss, and Annabeth. When Allison saw this she felt jealous, but she saw how Scott got on the Osprey, but she looked closer and saw the necklace they had given each other, and Allison touched hers. Thor, Loki went to the barracks to try to see how Scott is, but the Cows Brigade is attacking everywhere. If Scott fought at Pearl Harbor it was to defend the army, but he also went. Chris, to prevent them from advancing and getting closer to Beacon Hills. Thor, yes. Melissa, you know when this will end. Thor, we don't know Melissa, it could last years, but we will try to keep Scott safe. Melissa, I ask you please. Thor, don't worry now, I must go back. Thor says goodbye to everyone and leaves in the Bifrost. With Scott. He was already close to Paris, so he stops the Osprey in a forest where he quickly goes out and begins to jump through the trees. Kurama, Scott. Scott, if they don't find the ship but they know we're here, I'll try to get as close to Paris as I can, and then I'll hide so they don't detect my scent. Scott quickly jumped through the trees until he left the forest and reached an open field. Scott saw several Chitauri patrolling the area. Scott uses his camouflage suit and passes through the Chitauri that he couldn't pass and silently kills them. Scott passed the open field and had reached the city, but he didn't expect to see him like that. The buildings and houses were destroyed, several evil dragons were flying around the area. Scott entered a building and stayed there. Scott watched through a scope. Scott saw a Chitauri machine carrying ore, so he decided to follow it by jumping over the buildings. Scott followed him until he saw them entering a building. Scott used the visor to look through the underground. Scott, I found you. Scott saw the location and marked it on his holographic map. Scott, okay, I got the first one, now I have to find the prisoners. Scott jumped to another building until he saw the main base. Scott analyzed the ship and detected Chitauri and demons and found that higher up there were heat signatures gathered but weak. Scott, I found them. Kurama, if you go in now they could kill you if they discover us. Scott, I'll wait until morning and pretend to be a demon. Kurama, good idea, and I know exactly where I'll get the suit. Scott saw a demon that had left the base and was walking. Scott quickly knocked him out and stripped him, put on the demon's suit and cut his neck. Scott sat up and closed his eyes. 4 hours passed and Scott woke up. Scott, it's dawn. Scott got up and dropped to the ground gently to start walking and easily enter without being detected. When he entered he saw that everyone was controlling the ships, so he went up to the prisons and saw everyone injured and without food. Scott quickly cut the bars of the cells and gathered everyone together, made everyone hold hands and used teleportation to return to the Osprey. Scott, they are safe now. Everyone was crying with happiness, others crying for having lost a family member. Scott, get on the Osprey, the 45 hostages that were there got on. Scott, the Osprey is on autopilot and will take you to the nearest USS. Everyone thanked him, crying. Scott, good luck. Scott saw how the Osprey was flying and went out activating its camouflage. Scott used teleportation again, but this time to the building near the entrance to the subway. When he arrived he saw that they were about to bring in more materials. Scott got into the materials to be brought in, and saw how they were going down on a train to the main entrance. Scott left the mineral car and hid in the ducts. He scanned all the underground structures. When he reached a certain room he saw how there were massacred humans they were using as experiments. Scott saw this with horror. Scott continued until he entered another room where there were capsules and inside there were monsters. Scott, they used the hosts to create these things, I can't believe it. Scott was getting angry. Kurama, Scott, calm down. Scott, how am I going to calm down if... In that he approaches a capsule and sees one of them say, "Kill me." Scott's look became duller and duller. Scott placed bombs in the tubes and structures. "Kurama, Scott, are you okay?" "Scott, I will be, but I don't want to be here anymore. Let's find Fenrir." Scott was looking for him until he detected a huge heat signal in the east room and saw Fenrir all wounded and beaten. "Scott, they have no soul. They only kill, torture for pleasure. These things have no soul." Scott approached Fenrir, but he walked away in fear. "Scott, calm down. We will get out of here." Scott showed him a familiar contract. Fenrir hesitated but saw how the Chitauri and demon scientists returned. Fenrir quickly accepted the family contract, and Scott made him disappear so he could enter the family forest. Scott created 2 clones and placed more bombs throughout the structure. When they were done, Scott undid the clones. "Scott, I hope they rot in Tartarus and hell." Scott used teleportation and went out to the building. While there, I activated the bombs and saw how the building moved. Then everything on the ground began to explode. Until the entrance building exploded. Scott looked through his visor for any signs of heat, but there wasn't one. Scott was crying, but his face didn't reflect sadness or pain, just nothing. "Kurama, Scott." "Scott, I'm fine. I just want to rest from this." Scott teleported to the turrets he had destroyed and saw how the Alliance had advanced to take Normandy. Scott returned to the USS. "Major Scott, how was the mission?" Scott's suit was covered in blood. "Scott, mission completed." "Major, there's someone who needs to see you." Loki and Sylvie appeared then. "Loki, Scott, how are you?" "Scott, Uncle Loki, I'm fine. I want to go rest." Loki saw Scott's empty eyes. "Loki, where did they send you?" "General, I feel you on a mission." "Major, play the video from your camera." The Major played the video. Everyone in command saw what Scott had seen down there. Some soldiers were vomiting, others were crying with sadness, others were serious. "Major, savages." "Loki, I have to go talk to him." "Sylvie, Loki, leave it for now. He must process everything." Scott had arrived at a room in the USS, had entered the shower, had washed the blood off his body, and had gone to sleep. Season 2, Episode 15. Scott was getting up, showered, changed, and went out to the command cabin. "Major Scott, how are you?" "Scott, good. Major, how is the Alliance going?" "Major, we managed to take all of Normandy. Now they are advancing through Mantis La Jolie. We will be 1 hour from taking Paris. If their base in Paris falls, the one in Marseille will fall." "Scott, permission to go with my squad." "Major, are you sure?" "Scott, yes, sir." "Major, good." "Scott, thank you." Scott put on his suit and his swords. Scott teleported to you when he felt Katniss's key. Scott had appeared with his squad. "Katniss, Captain?" They all approach him. "Annabeth, how are you?" "Cisco, how did the mission go, Captain?" "Scott, good. How are the civilians?" "Tom, there are civilians 2 kilometers to the east. We take all of Normandy. The general gave us the order to take Paris and its base." "Scott, okay, let's go for those civilians and then to Paris." Scott, the Viper squad and the Alliance advanced until they reached Epone where the civilians were. The squad used the visors to see the heat trail of the civilians. "Hey Mitch, French citizens, we are the Alliance. Help has arrived." Then the doors of the buildings begin to open and injured and confused people come out. "Katniss, take them to the medical team to check them and send them to the refugee area." "Scott, let's continue." Scott and the others continued until they reached the entrance of Paris where they fought to enter. "Katniss, Tom, put the bombs on those walls, knock them down so the tanks can enter." Tom managed to sneak under the barricade. He touched all the walls and quickly moved away. 20 seconds later the entire wall exploded. "Katniss, tanks now. Scott, you lead well." "Katniss, thank you, Captain." The tanks entered and fired, freeing up enough space for the soldiers to enter. "Scott, divide up by the tall buildings. The base is 60 kilometers northeast of this point. Open up Chitauri, xenomorphs and dragons all over Paris. The main thing is to remove that shield so the fighters can give us cover. Katniss, okay, you heard, move. They all advanced and faced whoever they found. In that, Scott sees how the tanks were destroyed and the pilots burned out of the tank. Scott, Swait Unsuryuden no Jutsu. The dragon passed over the soldiers, putting out the fire that was burning them. Scott, take them to the medical group. The tanks cannot advance. There are turrets blocking the way. The tanks stopped. Scott, Katniss, come on. Scott touched Katniss, and they teleported to the top of the building. Scott, you see the turrets? Katniss, yes. Scott, they are inside the shields. Nothing can destroy it unless we destroy the shield. That is why I want you to shoot an arrow and let it right in the main part of the command room. Katniss, the arrow will not reach the shield. It will destroy it. Scott, have faith, just trust, aim at the command room. Just trust. Katniss took out an arrow and aimed. She added magic, but Scott put key into it. When the arrow touched the shield, the key broke it and the arrow reached the command cabin where it detonated and the shield fell. Scott, fighters, the shields fell, destroy those turrets. The fighters entered the city facing the dragons and destroying turrets. Scott and Katniss got out and advanced, killing everyone when they reached the base. Tom touched the entire wall and everything blew up. Scott, sir, we took Paris. Major, good, we already took off troops all over France. The Chinese and English recovered Portugal. The Russians and Japanese recovered Italy. It's a victory for us, but we have a problem. Scott, what is it, sir? Major, they settled in Africa. That's where they have their entire arsenal, all their ships and their entire army. Scott, they sent a group to analyze the base. Major, if this is what they felt. General, those things were set up as if it were their planet and attacked by the entire alliance towards their base is being organized. Scott, good. General, good job, Captain Lieutenant McCall. You and your squadron returned to Pearl Harbor for the attack. The French president and his government will be in charge of recovering your country. Scott, good. Scott, Cisco, a portal to the facilities in Pearl Harbor. Cisco, yes, sir. Cisco created a portal and he and his entire squadron crossed it. Major, good job, Captain McCall. The attack on Africa will begin in 4 days. You will have enough time to prepare. McCall is requested in the hospital for a medical checkup and psychological control. Scott, understood. Scott leaves with his squadron but sees Loki with Sylvie. Scott, see you at the headquarters. Scott approaches Loki. Scott, uncle. Loki, Scott, how are you? Scott, fine, I'm fine. Loki, what happened? Scott, it is better to forget that bad experience. The way Scott opens a portal and leaves from there. Loki, Fenrir. Scott, I rescued him on my mission. Now you can take him to Asgard. Loki, we can't. Scott, because Sylvie, I signed a contract with you, cannot leave with us. Scott, you want to stay with me, friend. Fenrir feels. Scott, okay, Uncle Loki, and I'm not okay. What I saw down there ended up proving what I already thought. Loki, what is it? Scott, that the enemies do not deserve any forgiveness. I will kill anyone who tries to defend them. I'm sorry, but I have to go to a medical checkup. Scott walked to the hospital and Fenrir returned. Scott, upon arriving at the hospital, meets Addison. Addison, it can't be, Scott. Addison hugged him. Scott, I am very calm. Then the doctor and Gabriella appear. Gabriella, thank God, Scott, you are okay. She hugs him too. Scott, I'm fine, Gabriella, I'm fine. Gabriella, we thought they could kill you there. Scott, well, they don't say that weeds never die. Doctor, I'm glad you're okay. Scott, what are you doing here? Scott, the major sent me for a medical and psychological checkup. Doctor, I understand, come on over here. The doctor took Scott away. After 1 hour. Doctor, well, your medical tests say you're fine, but your psychological test. Scott, what does it say? Doctor, you have problems. What you've seen on your mission, what you've been through has affected your mind more than we can imagine. Scott, what does that mean? Doctor, You could become a sociopath and kill anyone who makes you angry. Scott, I've tried to control myself for everyone who makes me angry, but from there to killing them, I don't think so. I'm not crazy. If I am like this, it's because of what I've seen. If one of those stupid psychologists saw what I've seen, they would go so crazy that they would rather be dead. Doctor, if the major or the general found out about this, they could put you on medical leave. Scott, I couldn't do anything, Doctor. Doctor, just this once, I will overwrite these results because I know you are trying to help everyone, just this once, Scott. Scott, thank you, Doctor. Scott said goodbye to the doctor and went outside and met up with Addison and Gabriella. Gabriella, how did it go? Scott, I was told everything was fine. Addison, if you don't mind, there's a party tonight at the bar. I don't know if you want to go. Scott, if it's okay, I'll be there. Gabriella, perfect, we'll see you tonight then. Scott, yes. Scott said goodbye to them and returned to his squad. Scott, hey, you guys have done an excellent job these days, and there's going to be a party tonight at the bar. They all agreed to go. In the evening, Scott was dressed in casual clothes. Scott walked into the bar and saw Gabriella and Addison wearing casual clothes too, so he greeted them. Then his squad arrived and they started drinking and dancing. Scott was watching Cisco dance and laughed. Addison, let's sing. Everyone got excited and started singing. Some did well, some didn't, but they were having fun until it was Addison and Gabriella's turn. Everyone clapped. Addison and Gabriella looked at each other. And they grabbed the microphones and started singing. Addison, you're the light, you're the night. You're the color of my blood. You're the cure, you're the pain. You're the only thing I want to touch. I never knew that it could mean so much, so much. Gabriella, you're the fear, I don't care. 'Cause I've never been so high. Follow me through the dark. Let me take you past our satellites. You can see the world you brought to life, to life. Addison, so love me like you do, la la love me like you do. Love me like you do, la la love me like you do. Addison / Gabriella, touch me like you do, ta ta touch me like you do. What are you waiting for? Fading in, fading out? On the edge of paradise. Every inch of your skin is a holy grail I've got to find. Addison, only you can set my heart on fire, on fire. When she sang, Addison and Gabriella would look at Scott, and he would look at them. Yeah, I'll let you set the piece. 'Cause I'm not straight thinking. My head's spinning around, I can't see clear no more. What are you waiting for? Love me like you do, la la love me like you do, like you do. Love me like you do, la la love me like you do. What are you waiting for? Love me like you do, la la love me like you do, like you do. Love me like you do, la la love me like you do, whoa. Touch me like you do, ta ta touch me like you do, ah. What are you waiting for? Scott, wow. Everyone applauded. She got off and it was Scott's turn. Katniss, wow, come on, Captain. Annabeth, you can. Tom, all in all, Captain. Addison, come on, Scott. Gabriella, Scott, you can do it. Scott walked up to the stage and grabbed the microphone. Scott started singing. Better back down, you're in my domain. Got the whole crowd screaming out our name. It's a blowout, it's a hurricane. It's over before you know it. Why you shaking? We're a dynasty. In the making, we're the royalty. We do it for the glory, for the glory. This is why we do it, whoa, whoa. This is what we live for, whoa. We're on top for the glory. We never run, for the glory. Hands to the sky. Never back down, whoa, whoa. Never back down, whoa. You're gonna know my name, for the glory. You're gonna know my name, for the glory. Everyone was surprised by Scott's voice and began to applaud him. Everyone continued drinking and drinking. Scott was dizzied, but Addison and Gabriella approached him. Gabriella, wow, calm down, Scott, haha. Addison, it's time for you to go rest. Scott was carried by them since he was sick. Scott starts to talk. Scott, no, I don't know what's wrong with me. Why do I feel this way? Addison, what do you mean, Scott? Gabriella, what are you talking about? Scott, you make me feel weird. My heart is happy when I'm around you. Addison and Gabriella blushed. Gabriella, Scott, don't say that. Addison, you have a crush. Scott, I lose and love you, but you guys make me feel the same way too. I am. Scott was feeling bad. Addison and Gabriella took him to their room at the USS and were about to leave, but Scott grabbed them by the waist and made them lay down with him. Scott, yeah? Scott fell asleep and Addison and Gabriella did nothing but fell asleep with him, but they liked him. Karama, there's Scott you still don't realize. Season 2 Episode 16 Out of Control. Scott was getting up and sees that Addison and Gabriella were next to him. Scott, or not. Addison, calm down, nothing happened. Gabriella, just that you grabbed us and we fell asleep here. Scott, I'm sorry for my behavior last night, I drank too much. Addison, you don't remember anything you said last night. Scott, no. Scott began to have memories of what he said last night. Scott, or not. Scott blushed. Then Karama appears in his small form. Addison, who is that little thing? Gabriella, eat here, little thing. Karama, don't treat me like I'm a dog, please. Scott, Karama, what are you doing here? Karama, there's something Goku didn't tell you when he left. Scott, what is it? Karama, that you became a god when he gave you his cells. Scott, oh god. Karama, the normal cells of a Saiyan turn you into a Super Saiyan, but the cells you received from Goku were not only from a normal Saiyan, they were from a Super Saiyan god, since I could see his memories when I sealed myself in you. Scott, I am a god. Karama, yes, and there is a transformation in that state, but you must reach it yourself, and there is another thing. Scott, which one? Karama, you can have more than one partner. You love Allison, but you also fell in love with Addison and Gabriella and others that you still have not discovered what you feel was polygamous. Scott, what the hell are you saying? I cannot be polygamous. No one will be with me if they know that I am going to love other women. It is a lot to process. I have to get out of here. I am sorry. Scott leaves, leaving the girls and Karama inside his room. Karama, I'm sorry about that. Now he is tense and doesn't know what to think. Addison, what you say is true. Karama, what part of him being a god or that he can have more than one partner? Gabriella, both. Karama, well, yes, it is true, although now he feels that he is betraying Allison and he doesn't want to. Addison, do you know where Allison lives? Karama, yes, why? Gabriella, we want to talk to her. Karama, you already made your decision, isn't it true? Addison, we talked about it. We fell in love with Scott at first sight, and after seeing what he did for us and everyone even more. Gabriella, we want to be with him. Karama, if you want to talk to Allison, she is in this city at this address. Karama wrote it on Scott's laptop. Karama, I'm leaving, I have to see Scott. Karama disappeared. Addison and Gabriella went in a magic circle to Beacon Hills. When they arrived, they see the entire town. They took a taxi and arrived at Allison's house, knocked on the door, and Chris came out. Chris, yes, who are you? Gabriella, I'm Gabriella Montez and this is Addison Wells. Addison, we came to talk to Allison. Gabriella, it's urgent. Chris, she's at school now, but she doesn't want to come back. You can come in and wait for her. They go in and wait for her for an hour and Allison arrives. Allison, Dad, Mom, I'm back. Victoria, Allison, there are some ladies who want to talk to you. Allison enters her living room. Allison, hello? Addison, you must be Allison. I'm Addison Wells and this is Gabriella Montez. Allison, nice to meet you. You had to talk to me. Allison recognized them from the video that Thor showed them. Addison, we know Scott. Allison, something happened to him, okay. Gabriella, yes, it's okay, just that we have something we want you to know. Allison, of course. Victoria, I'll leave you two alone to talk. Victoria leaves. Allison, And well, what was it that you had to tell me about Scott? Addison, Scott didn't tell you everything that is true. Allison, he didn't feel that if he told me, all his humanity would go away. Gabriella, did you see the video where he saved us at Pearl Harbor and used a strange power? Allison, yes, I saw it. Addison, because of what Kurama told us. Allison, who is Kurama? Gabriella, he's Scott's friend before they called him QB. Allison, QB yes, but he can talk. Addison, from what we know this world hides much more than what is seen with the naked eye, but that is not the case. Kurama told us that Scott bit a person named Goku. When he did, he absorbed his cells called Saiyan. These cells are not from this world. Apparently this Goku came from a planet called Vegeta, and that he wanted to leave his powers to one last bearer. Allison, that was Scott. Gabriella, yes, he also told us that Scott by absorbing the cells became a god. Allison was surprised. Allison, a god like Zeus and Thor. Gabriella, yes, and that power, and that of Kurama himself make him become polygamous who can fall in love with several women. Allison couldn't believe it. Addison, I know it may sound stupid and you'll think that Scott is trying to trick you, but Scott is not like that and he left before we could talk to him. Allison, I know Scott is not like that, he would never cheat on me. Gabriella, it's complicated everything we say, but... Allison, tell me something, you are really in love with him. Addison, not only us, there are also more who fell in love with Scott. Allison was there thinking, but she knew that Scott would not be unfaithful to her, and she knew that now he was with his head somewhere else. Allison, we can go with him. Addison, to Pearl Harbor. Allison, yes. Gabriella, yes, we will ask for permits. Who will come? Allison, his parents, Styles, my father, Lydia Jackson, and I. Gabriella, okay, 7 people. I already sent the doctor to make us 7 visitor permits. Allison, okay, let's go then. Allison told everyone and they gathered at Allison's house. Victoria, be careful. Allison said goodbye and Gabriella used a magic circle and everyone appeared at the hospital. Doctor, they finally arrived. Take, these are your visitor passes. Addison, have you seen Scott, doctor? Doctor, no, he hasn't been here, but his squad is nearby. They were just here a little while ago. They suddenly know something. Gabriella, thank you, doctor. They all walked outside the hospital and at the exit they met Scott's squad. Gabriella, Katniss. Katniss, or hello Gabriella. Addison, and these are? Addison, they are Scott's friends and parents. Katniss, nice to meet you. Allison, have you seen Scott? Katniss, the captain, no, we haven't seen him since yesterday. Then a call comes to Katniss. Katniss, Major. Major, Captain Everdeen, we have a small problem. We want your entire team here. It has to do with your captain. Cisco, what did they tell you? Katniss, you better come with me. The Major has something to tell us about Scott. They all went to the cockpit where the Major was. Major, Captain Everdeen, I told you only to your squadron. Katniss, they are family and friends of Captain Scott. Major, it is better to see if they can help us. Katniss, what happened? Major, 1 hour ago Captain Lieutenant Scott McCall was located in the Sahara Desert. When we had a direct link, he showed us this. A video and images were shown. Katniss, what is that? Major, who is Captain Everdeen? According to the radar is Captain Lieutenant McCall. We sent a team near the desert coming from Italy, but I just received confirmation that the soldiers had to use their magic escape circles. One of the soldiers told us it was hostile. They didn't last even 1 minute. Melissa, no, it's not possible. He can't be my son. Loki, in fact it is. Raphael, Mr. Loki, what do you mean that thing is my son? Loki, I feel your soul inside that thing. Melissa, what happened to it? 3 hours before. Scott was on the beach thinking what to do until Kurama appears. Kurama, are you okay? Scott, no, I'm okay. It's very possible that I could go crazy and kill an ally or a friend, and now you tell me that I'm a god, that I'm polygamous, and that I can have several partners. And you say that I'm in love with Addison and Gabriella. I would never be unfaithful to Allison ever. Kurama, Scott, calm down, don't get upset. Scott, how do you want me not to get upset? How do you want me not to? Karama, Scott, calm down another kilo. Scott was short of breath. Scott, I'm not short of breath. Karama, it's an anxiety attack, your inhaler. Scott, I already threw it away, I didn't use it. Scott was there until it stopped. Karama, Scott? Scott didn't respond, but a red aura was beginning to come out of Scott's body. Karama, or not, Scott, calm down, you're letting yourself be carried away by anger. Scott, I can't anymore, I can't, get me out of here. Karama used Scott's body, and you were brought to the desert. Scott, what's happening to me? Karama, it's because you're a Jinchuriki that your anger makes my evil steel come out. Scott, no, I can't control myself. Scott exploded with power. Scott had emerged from the black and red sphere with another appearance. Major, we'll send Viper Squad to see if Scott recognizes them, otherwise they'll have to contain him and put him to sleep. Viper Squad, yes sir. Major, get ready. Allison, I have to go too. Melissa, me too. Raphael and me. Major, no civilians will go. Loki, leave them, I'll go with them. Steels, you're coming too. Styles, yes. Viper Squad got ready. And Loki opened the Bifrost, and they entered it until they reached the Sahara Desert. Loki, be careful and stay alert. Katniss, I have detected your signal 809M north. Loki, it's behind that sand hill. They all go up and see that Scott was still. Scott feels them and starts to grow at them. Allison, Scott, it's me, Allison. Scott sees her, and his head starts to hurt. Scott, Quade. The creature jumped to attack them, but Loki created a barrier that contained it. Loki, Katniss, hold it. The Vior Squad launched itself at Scott. Scott was getting angry. Scott used his tails to push the Vior Squad away until red and blue sharpening steels began to appear. Loki, shield squad now. Everyone began to create shields. Scott unleashed a powerful attack, but the shields were able to hold him back. Then Karama appears. Addison, Karama, what happened to you? Karama, the evil chakra took control of his emotions. He tried to counteract it, but Scott refuses to understand. Allison, you can take us with him. Karama, yes. Allison, come on. Karama made the family get together and hold hands. Karama, Loki, cover us. Loki, well, don't take long, I don't know how long we'll last. Loki created more shields. Karama made everyone enter Naruto's mind. Allison, where are we? Karama, in Scott's mind. Everyone saw the huge forest that was there. Karama, he made his mind look like that so he could be calm before he slept in a sewer. Karama adopted his giant form. Katniss, you are the huge fox that faced the Muto. Karama, my name is Karama, let's continue. Karama walked and entered the forest where there were giant trees. As they entered, everything clouded over and they saw Scott in the distance. Melissa/Raphael, they are. Addison, Allison, Gabriella, Scott. Styles, Scott. Scott, what are you doing here? Allison, we're coming for you, Scott. Scott, go away, I'm just one problem after another. Melissa, don't say that you're my son. And we love you too much to lose you. Scott, I shouldn't be here. Raphael, son, think again. Gasoline appeared under Scott and in his hand he had flares. Karama, not Scott. Styles, Scott, listen to me, you can't do this if he lets go of that. Scott, it's all my fault. Allison, Scott, what's happening isn't your fault, you know it's not your fault. Scott, every time I try to fight it only gets worse, I can't protect anyone, people keep dying. Styles, Scott, listen to me, this isn't you, it's someone in your head telling you what to do, so now. Scott, and if it's not, and if it's just me, and if what I'm doing is the best for others, it all started that night when I got bitten. Remember what it was like before that? You and I weren't anything, we weren't popular, we weren't good at lacrosse, we weren't important, we weren't anybody. Maybe I should go back to being nobody and nobody. Scott tried to burn himself. Styles, Scott, please listen to me. Don't believe nonsense. You're someone. You're my best friend. Yes, I need you, Scott. You're my brother. Styles slowly approached him until he touched the flare. Stoles, so we'll do it together. You'll have to take me with you. Lydia, Jackson, Melissa, Raphael, Allison, Addison, and Gabriella were crying. Styles takes the flare from him and throws it away. Styles, Scott. In that, Styles is pulled away from Scott, and the circle of gasoline became a circle of fire that surrounded Scott. All Scott. Kurama, calm down, he'll be fine, he's just expelling evil. Scott was in the circle of fire until he went out into the distance, and a giant red dome formed. Everyone saw Scott and ran towards him, hugged him and kissed him. Styles, you're okay. Scott, yeah, I'm fine. Kurama, what was that? Kurama, an evil hidden in you, and with my power and chakra everything got worse. Scott, and that thing. Kurama, it's all the evil chakra you expelled. In that, the dome breaks and a giant creature appears. Outside where Loki was. Scott had stopped. Loki, he finally stopped. But a portal opened. Katniss, what is that? Loki, whose portal? Major, it's not ours, I repeat, it's not ours, get ready. Katniss, it's not ours, get ready. Out of the portal he comes out. Loki, it's Grindle the evil dragon. Major, it's a Category 5 enemy, be careful. Grindle, give me that thing. With Scott. Allison, are you okay? Scott, yes thanks. Kurama, what is that thing? Kurama, it's all your evil chakra, it's you. Scott, I know what to do, can you help me? Kurama, always. Scott and Kurama fist bump and Kurama disappears. Scott, come on Kurama. Scott begins to change shape and generates smoke. When dissipating you could see Scott. Scott, wow. Kurama, now? Scott, ay. Scott was inside Kurama's chakra and launched himself at the creature. The creature saw him and grew led at him and launched itself at him, but when they collided, Scott hugged him. Everyone thought what he was going to do, but the creature was beginning to shrink, and so it was Scott. When the giant chakra disappeared, Kurama returned. Styles, what happened? Kurama, look. They saw how Scott was in front of a totally white Scott hugging each other. Scott, thank you for taking care of me for the 17 years I've been alive. If I'm still alive, it's thanks to you. The white Scott just shed a tear and disappeared with a smile. Raphael, what happened? Scott, we became one again. Scott, let's get out of here. Everyone left Scott's mind. When they appeared, they saw Loki and the others on the ground, tired. Raphael, Mr. Loki, what happened? Loki, get out of here. In that, behind them appears Grindle, who was about to hit them, but a red tail grabs him and sends him away. Allison, I thought Scott would be there. That's when all the red chakra disappears and Scott appears. Scott, calm down, I'm fine, who are you? Grindle, I'm Grindle, and they sent me for you, and I will take you by force if necessary. Scott, well, try it. Grindle launched himself at Scott and Scott threw him away. Grindle throws green fire at him, but Scott created a huge stone wall. Scott, Uncle Loki, protect my parents and my friends, Captain Katniss. Katniss, Captain? Scott, thanks for holding me back. Scott smiles at her and her blushes. Scott launches himself at Grindle, punching him and kicking him in the face. Grindle, damn. Grindle tries to land a punch, but Scott grabs him. Scott, you were an idiot for giving yourself away and coming to a place where I am. Scott kicks Grindle and he flies into the air, but Grindle hears his wings. Grindle, in the air you can't do anything to me. Grindle was throwing fire attacks at him. Scott simply didn't move. Grindle, the skies are dragon territory. Either you nor anyone else can touch me here. Scott, you're safe. Scott disappears and appears behind Grindle, kicking him to the ground. Grindle, damn, I'm tired of you. Grindle begins to grow and his body begins to release smoke and scales appear until. Grindle, ha 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 die. Grindle flew towards Scott and was going to connect a punch, but Scott dodges it. Scott, Kurama ready. Grindle, not so fast. Grendel kicks him and sends him to the ground. Loki, I don't know how much longer the shield can resist. Grendel, it won't be long. Grendel was going to charge the shield and break it to kill Loki, and the others were about to arrive when Scott appeared in front of him and grabbed his fist. Scott, you are going to kill my family. Scott punches him, sending him into the sand. Scott was starting to lose power. Scott, Biju mode. Kurama, we have to destroy it. Scott went against Grendel, kicking him and throwing jutsus and energy attacks. Grendel, I will not die to someone like you. Final destruction. A lot of fire came out for Scott. Scott, let's do this. Kurama / Scott, Bijudama. Both attacks collided with each other, but Scott's won by going against a mountain and destroying it. Loki, the mountain disappeared. What a destructive power. Katniss, he must be dead. Loki, Grendel has hard and strong attacks, but this one doesn't know. Seconds passed, and in the hole that was left was a Grendel on the ground, defeated but awake. Grendel, damn monster, but if I die I will take you with me. Grendel had begun to release all his power to self-destruct himself, and everyone else. Grendel, die. Grendel was about to self-destruct, but Scott, you are the one who should die. Futon Rasen Shuriken. The attack ate Grendel full and began to destroy him everywhere. Loki, the shockwave is coming. The attack moved almost the entire desert. Styles, what is this? Katniss, one of the captain's attacks. Annabeth, incredible. Grendel, I'm going to die like this, damn it. The power sphere disappeared and there was no one there. Grendel had been disintegrated by the attack. Scott returned to where everyone was. Scott saw how everyone ran to see him. He thought they would scold him, but they all hugged him. Melissa, I'm glad you're okay. Scott, me too. Melissa gives him a slap on the head. Scott, oops. Melissa, if you do something like that again you'll see. Melissa hugged her again. Scott saw Allison and approached her. Allison, Scott. Allison hugged him. Scott, Allison, me. Allison, calm down, we'll talk later, they already told me everything. Allison hugged Scott tighter. Season 2 Episode 17 Season Finale. Scott was in his room talking to Allison. Allison, Scott, now about what they told me. Scott, Allison would never ever be unfaithful to you ever, and I don't look to be an I. Allison, calm down. Addison and Gabriella explained everything to me. Scott, so you know what I am? Allison, yes, I know you're polygamous because you're a god in itself. Scott, I didn't want to be like that and I don't want to be failing you. Allison, Scott, I understand, yes, and we talked about it with Addison and Gabriella and we decided to be with you. Scott looked stunned. Scott, you want to be with me? Allison, Scott, you don't decide who you fell in love with, you never decide, it just happens like it happened to me with you. I fell in love with you without thinking. Scott, when I met you I thought how beautiful this girl is. I thought, how is it possible that she fell in love with me? What did I do to have her with me? What did I do to deserve so much love from her? Allison hugs him and kisses him. Allison, I love you more than my life. I love you today, tomorrow, and always. I know that now I have to share you with more girls, but now I know that you cannot avoid it. It is not because you want to be unfaithful, and I hope that you love us all equally. Scott, of course I love you and I always will. Scott and Allison kiss. Allison, Addison, Gabriella comes in. Addison and Gabriella enter. Scott, girls, I know it has been a few days and I know that there is not enough time to get to know the people you love, but if you could be with an idiot like me. They didn't say anything and hugged him. Addison, we fell in love with you the day we met. Gabriella, and we want to be with you and for you to love us equally. Scott gives each of them a kiss. Scott, and what do we do now? They were going to respond when the alarms sound. Allison, what's going on? Scott, don't follow them. Scott goes out with them, following her to the command where the Major was. Scott, Major, what's going on? Major, Captain McCall, just in time. China is being attacked. The army has already been sent in retaliation. The gods are also there. We will send a USS and also the Viper Squadron. Scott, permission to go in this battle, sir. Major, permission granted. McCall, get ready, leaving in 30 minutes. Scott, sir, a question. Captain Rayan Lau. Major, she is in combat alongside the gods and her squadron. Scott, okay. Major, yes. Scott, sir, can I ask you please? Major, what is it? Scott, so that my family can be here for a few months without affecting their studies and they can train. General, please, granted. Captain McCall. Scott, thank you, sir. General, get out as soon as possible. Scott, yes, sir. Scott went to the armory, and they gave him a bracelet. Scott, what is this? Scientist, press it. Scott does it and... Scott, wow. Scientist, it's nanotechnology combined with the element. If it breaks, it will rebuild itself when destroyed. Scott, excellent. Then you get a call. Scott, hello, yes, I know you, I understand, I'm going there. Scott, I'll be back in 15 minutes. Scott teleports to a courtroom. Sergeant, who are you? What are you doing in this trial? Scott, Lieutenant Captain of the First Response Squadron of Pearl Harbor of the Viper Squadron. Everyone greeted him with respect. Scott, why is this trial? Sergeant, Private Doss refuses to carry a weapon and removes authority from his superiors. Scott, Private Doss is a conscientious objector, so he is allowed to go to war without using a weapon or any attack spell. Sergeant, sir. Scott, with this stupid trial of a stupid court-martial, you dirty everything I fought for. Sergeant, I'm sorry, sir. Scott, you guys are breaking at least a dozen laws that the Constitution supports, and I'm sure you're not the only one they're doing this to. I'll report this to the general so he can take the necessary measures. Sergeant, yes, sir, I'm sorry. Scott, do your job well if you're going to court-martial a soldier who just wants to go save his comrades. Sergeant, the trial is closed. Private Doss is free of any complaints. Scott, I knew you'd get into trouble. Doss, thanks for coming. Scott, don't thank me, thank your dad. He was the one who contacted me. I have to go. Scott teleports back to the armory. Scott, I'm back. Scientist, the army is ready. When they cross the portal, they will arrive in China in seconds. Scott, good. Scott went out and saw everyone boarding the USS. Scott saw his family, girlfriends and friends waiting for him. Melissa, take care, they are. Scott, I will. Mother. Raphael, defeat, they are. Scott, I will. Chris, good luck, Scott. Scott, thanks. Styles, be careful, Scott. Scott hugs him. Scott, I consider you my brother too. Styles, take care of them for me, I'll be fine. The girls hug him and kiss him. Scott, I'll be back, don't worry. Allison, Addison, Gabriella, we love you. Scott, and I love you all. Scott gets on the USS and it disappears into the portal. When he leaves the portal, they see that China was holding out everywhere, in Hong Kong, in Fujian, in Beijing, and everywhere. General, okay, get ready. Now deploy. Everyone started to leave in ships, planes, and helicopters. Fighters were in the air. General, protect the civilians. Don't get through. Scott jumps and destroys an enemy alien ship. Several Leviathans were in the air but were being contained by the army. Chitauri, free them, free the dragons. Evil dragons began to come out of the ships. Their fire burned everything they touched. Soldier, they're finishing us off, Retriati. The soldier was burned. Soldier, it can't be. The soldiers began to run and were about to be burned, but a dragon contained all the fire. Soldier, it's Yulong. Take advantage and attack. Soldier, it's Sun Wukong. Sun, well, it's time to fight too. Yulong launched himself against the evil dragons and began to destroy them one by one. Scott and his squadron destroyed all those who crossed their path. Scott was destroying ships until he sees several dark dragons approaching Yulong and Sun Wukong. Scott launched himself towards the dragons. Scott, Kamehameha. Sun Wukong, that attack. Sun Wukong turns around and sees that Scott had destroyed several evil dragons. Scott Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Scott created 4 clones, and they threw themselves at the enemies. Sun Wukong, brat, where are you from? Scott, from the United States. Sun Wukong, in case you know someone named Goku. Scott, he was my teacher because. Sun Wukong, now I understand. Scott, I met my teacher. Sun Wukong, he was my friend. He told me that he was not from this world, that he had come here sent by his parents to survive. Scott, so he knows everything. Sun Wukong, yes. Yulong, and if you stop talking and help me. Sun Wukong, spread out Naoibo. Sun Wukong destroyed several evil dragons. Scott, Senpo Futon Rasen Shuriken. The giant Rasen Shuriken hit several dragons, causing it to expand and kill even more. The 3 of them were destroying the enemies, but neither Scott nor Su Wukong nor Yulong noticed that a portal was forming behind them. When Sun Wukong was about to move, he was pierced by a knife. Scott, Sun Wukong. Scott quickly grabbed it. Sun Wukong, chow chow. Chow chow, ha 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 ha, I told you I was going to kill you, damn old man, because of you the security eye is still alive. Yulong tried to attack him, but a metal dragon rammed into him. Scott, Yulong. Yulong, bad word. Chow chow, well done, Jean. Jean, thank you. Scott, who are you? Sun Wukong, you are the hero faction AAA. Sun Wukong was slowly burning. Scott, what is this? Chow chow, it is Samuel's blood, the most powerful poison in the world, he will not survive. Sun Wukong, so this is as far as it goes, AAA. Several soldiers were shooting at Chow Chow and Jean and they counterattacked. Chow Chow, I'll be quick with you, balance breaker. Chow Chow was destroying the soldiers. Sun Wukong, Scott takes this. Sun Wukong brings him a block. Scott, what is this? Sun Wukong, I stopped using my weapon years ago because I couldn't handle its power, but you can. Scott, what's your name? Sun Wukong hits him on the head, and Scott starts having visions. Scott, so your name was Jean Mori? Sun Wukong, that's what my grandfather named me. Scott, hang on here. Scott threw Naoibo into the air and a giant staff fell in its place. Scott had given his Saiyan energy and his QB chakra to Sun Wukong, the poison disappearing completely. Sun Wukong, how is that? Scott, rest, I'll take care of everything. Chow Chow turned and looked at him and felt a strange power. Chow Chow, what is that power? Scott, shrink Naoibo. Scott shrank Naoibo and moved him masterfully. Chow Chow, show me. Scott disappeared and appeared in front of Chow Chow, hitting and kicking him just like him. Scott received a strong kick that sent him away from there until he reached the water where monsters tried to eat him, but Scott moved Naoibo and began to kill them one by one until there was no one left. Scott launched himself again against Chow Chow, breaking all his armor and starting to fight at a speed barely visible to the soldiers. Soldier, I don't see anything. Chow Chow grabs Scott and slams him against the ground. Chow Chow, my power will devour everything and all of yours too. Scott, spread out Naoibo. Scott started running on top of Niobe, hitting Chow Chow. Scott for Sun Wukong. He pushes him further. Scott for Yulong. He hits him more. Scott for China. He slams him into the ground. Scott for the AAA Alliance. When he hits him on the ground, an explosion rises as the smoke from the explosion fades. Chow Chow. No, I can't lose like that. Scott, that was your mistake, get together, Kinton. Several clouds formed around everyone. Scott raised his fist and several thunderclaps formed. Scott, fall down. Scott, fall. Chow Chow took all the attacks, leaving him with serious injuries. Jean, we better go. Jean had grabbed Chow Chow, but Scott appeared above them and kicked them both. Scott, they won't go. Scott, Kamehameha. Scott destroyed Chow Chow, turning him into dust. Jean, Chow Ka. Scott knocked her out. Scott, take her away. Scott went to Sun Wukong. Scott, are you okay? Sun Wukong, yes, my body stopped feeling the poison. Scott, rest for now, soldiers. 2 soldiers appeared. Soldiers, yes, sir. Scott, take her to the medical area so the doctor can check her and tell him that she was cut with Samuel's blood. Scott tried to give Naruto back to him. Sun Wukong, she's yours, boy. I can't fight anymore. My body has grown old and my powers are not like before. I leave you my power and my will. Protect China and this world. Scott, I will. The soldiers were taking Sun Wukong away when an explosion shook everything. They saw how a giant portal had been created and was absorbing everything. The soldiers escaped with their magic circles, the gods too, but Scott saw how Yulong was injured and couldn't fly very fast. Scott quickly appeared next to him and pushed him quickly, but the portal was stronger. Scott created a magic circle and they appeared far away from the portal. Scott scanned the entire area to see if anyone was trapped. He didn't detect anyone until he saw a trace of heat under some rubble. Scott quickly broke the rubble and saw that it was Ryan Lau. Scott, Ryan. Ryan, Scott, help me. Scott, come on. Scott helped her out, and they were escaping from the portal when a building was about to hit them. Scott destroys the building and they pass, but the force of attraction of the portal had reached them. Ryan, Scott, let me, you have to save yourself. Scott, not only one will be saved, that's you. Scott Ryan pushed away as best he could and he got to the portal. When he got there, the portal became smaller and his body trapped him. When everyone got closer, they saw Scott's body trapped in the portal. Several magic circles appeared and from them came Scott's family, his friends, his girlfriends, the major and the general. Allison, Scott. Scott looked up. Everyone saw him and couldn't believe it. General, Captain Lieutenant Scott. Scott, I'm fine, General, it doesn't hurt, but what is this? General, according to our scientists, it's a portal. Scott, portal to where? General, to any part of the universe. Scott, I understand. His family tried to get closer. Scott, don't come closer, we don't know if it could open again. Everyone was crying. Ryan, I'm sorry, it's my fault if you had left me. Scott, calm down, it's okay. Then the portal began to sound. Scott, sir, can you check if there is magical or technological interference? The general called the scientists. General, there is none. Scott, sir, I want Beacon Hills to be absolved from sending recruits. Overall, fine. Scott, I also want my family to be trained so they can defend themselves. General, donate. Everyone was crying. Scott, I'll be okay wherever I go. I'll be back to you all. I promise I'll be back. Allison ran over. Scott, careful. Allison kissed him. Scott kissed her back. Allison, please come back to me, to your family, come back to us. Scott, I will, I swear. The portal glowed and was about to take Scott away. Scott, Alliance, you are the only ones who can stop this. You are the only ones who can end this war. Fight for your families, for your country, for your home, for your planet. Fight for your honor. Scott, I love you all. The portal swallowed Scott. And it closed. Allison was on the floor with her face covered. Allison, Chris hugs Allison. Chris, we have to have faith that he will come back. Allison cried in her father's arms. Everyone else was shedding tears. Somewhere in space, Scott was coming out of there. At first he covered his mouth, but when he could not resist any longer, he tried to breathe and realized that he could. Scott, I'm okay, I can breathe. Kurama, it's because you're a scion. Scott, that's good to see. Scott transformed into Super Saiyan and began to fly through space. Scott, I don't know where to go, but I can't stay still. Scott was going to take off again, but a ship crossed his path. Scott or not?
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.